throw attempts. That's pretty efficient, Dwayne.
Yeah, and I mean, Tiger Shanks is a guy who really stands out when you look at this particular offensive line class, and it's because of the number you mentioned. His career starts, right? I mean, this is a guy who has played over 50 games at the Division I level, starting at the tackle position, in a class where you don't have anybody else who compares to that, quite frankly. And you know, I mean, his background, his high school background, he's a young man who was born in Vancouver but raised in the U.S., so played all his high school and college football in the U.S., so sort of comes in with a resume similar to the American tackles we're seeing. I imagine he'll get an opportunity to compete at his natural position first, before sometimes there's that automatic tendency to want to move your Canadians inside. But this is a guy who could really help be a ratio buster at the tackle spot.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that there were some pretty intense discussions in the Alouettes war room or leading up to this, because you're sitting with Christopher Fortin there, who's from St. Rene, Quebec, and could immediately play a right guard for you, where typically the Alouettes have had a legendary French-Canadian offensive lineman, Christian Matt, retiring, and obviously at the other side you've got some great players as well. But I'm intrigued by this, not just because of the size of the man and the pedigree and all the rest, but in the era of the transfer portal and the NIL agreements and all the rest, and we got players in this draft that are 5 years, 5 different schools that are just moving all over the place. Tiger Shanks has an incredible life journey, as you say, from being born in Vancouver, going to China, settling down in Oregon, playing in Nevada, goes to one school, never transfers, right? Like plays those 51 games all in the same spot and finds comfort, and is the first offensive lineman as well in program history in over 20 years to be a first-team all-conference selection. So he's not just good at what he does, he's a pretty special player, and it looks like Montreal is going to go a little bit of a different direction with their offensive line here, Lapo, but I think it's an interesting pick.
What I loved about him is I thought the best thing he did was pass protect. He has long arms. He can bench press people off him, and you use the term playing long. Can this guy play long? What does that mean? Keep defenders off your body so you don't get thrown. He did that very well. I really think his feet, for 6'5", he can get out of situations like bad situations. What's a bad situation? It's not hanging out at 7-Eleven Marshall in the back area. It's when your feet get too close together as an offensive lineman. He's got the ability to move his feet and go. This guy, I think, competes as a tackle. I really think so. Like, he's patient as a pass protector. You know, he was a little inconsistent in the run game, but this guy's a really good football player. This is a great pick.
Yeah, and I think this really fits Montreal's roster. You mentioned Christian Matt having retired. Montreal bought some time because Christian Matt played so long. They had brought Philippe Gagnon back. He signs with Saskatchewan this year. But I go back to the COVID years, right? And during that time, Montreal lost a couple of high picks, young guys that were developing on their offensive line, Tyler Johnstone, Trey Rutherford, guys who had been high picks for them and were in that starting lineup. Johnstone, in fact, a starter at the tackle spot. They bought some time, as I said, with veteran guys, but needed to look offensive line. I think a lot of people anticipated it might be Fortin because of that Quebec connection. But the fact is, with Tiger Shanks available and the flexibility he maybe offers you, as you said, as a tackle, tough value to pass up.
Yeah, and you certainly, you know, my first question is who replaces Christian Matt? They got Jesse Gibbon, who's, you know, veteran in the league, and hasn't become a starter, but Cyril Hogan-Saint-Don came over from Ottawa. So they got a couple of guys who've got experience playing in there. This is just another really good player. Maybe he's inside, but maybe he's a two-player. He can play guard or tackle, and he's certainly a really good tackle.
5 picks down in the first round of the CFL Draft. Next up, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the 5-time West Division champion. Lots of turnover in the Peg this year. This is an important draft for them. Here's a look at the first-round draft picks for the Bombers in the last 5 years. They didn't have one a year ago, though they did get Kevin Clercius in the second round, who was productive. But when you look at this list, none of them are still with the Bombers. So first-round value is going to be imperative in this year's draft, and with the Bombers selection, here's the commissioner.
With the 6th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers select Connor Shay, linebacker, Wyoming. Toronto, you are now on the clock.
This is an impressive pick, a player that many had mocked to go #1 overall, including our own Marshall Ferguson. 4.52 in the 40. He's got a couple of mini camps before that, but this guy can run and play.
Yeah, something of a late riser. Connor Shay is a guy figured out he was eligible for the CFL draft basically in his senior year. His father is Canadian. He thus has Canadian citizenship. Didn't become a starter until his last year at Wyoming, but again, they've had some pretty good linebackers there ahead of him. Good special teams performer as he was biding his time waiting to become a starter, which is something that will translate well to the Canadian Football League. But when you look at the linebackers who are in starting positions in the CFL, the thing that stands out about them, as we talked about with Devin Verasuk, is that athleticism. And for a young Canadian linebacker coming into the league, we talked about Ali Saad as a D lineman, and he's got Corey Mace as a coach. How about a young linebacker coming in and he's got Mike O'Shea as his head coach, teaching him the ropes and helping him adjust to life in the Canadian Football League.
It's a lucky player to get to work with Mike O'Shea and be around in that room for sure. But yeah, smaller CFL style build, if you want to call it that, quick, aggressive. When I watch him, I thought he kind of seems like he just waits, and pounces. And man, when he takes off, he can run sideline to sideline. The 65-yard wide field is going to be an absolute asset. I think he's going to enjoy playing in this league because he's got that type of motor that you look for, obviously, at the position. But also, when I look at what right now Winnipeg has going on middle linebacker, we know Adam Bighill was a long-time amazing all-star player for the Bombers. But Lapo, now you're looking at Tony Jones is in there, did a good job filling in last year when Biggie got hurt. And then you have brought over Jonathan Jones from the Toronto Argonauts as well. But in terms of Canadian talent at the position, Shane Gauthier and Tanner Cadwallader, right? And so adding Connor Shay into the mix and giving him that flexibility, whether it be in the middle or weak side, I think that does upgrade Winnipeg's defense significantly if they can get him up to speed.
I think the first person who's happy is Mike Miller, special teams coordinator. He gets an outstanding special teams player. Mike O'Shea can work on developing him. Can he be a starter in the Canadian Football League? But I think you hit the nail on the head. There are times on tape that there's a little bit of hesitation. Once he figures out that hesitation, he can be a dynamic player. Gets rid of that hesitation because when he puts his foot in the ground and runs sideline to sideline, he hits people and he hits them in a bad mood. So this is a really dynamic linebacker. We just got to get him more reps, and when he gets more reps, then he can make more plays.
Very rarely gets fooled, right? Like, that's the whole thing. But also playing in Winnipeg, you're going to go up against AJ Ouellette and the Riders. And it's like, well, you're not going to get fooled, but you're also going to have to step in the hole at some point and deal with AJ.
Well, he had no problem stepping into the hole and taking on Ashton Genty, the 6th overall pick in the NFL draft by the Raiders. Had a pretty good game in that one. I think he can handle himself against big-time names. Next up, the Toronto Argos. Kevin Mittal was their pick in the first round last year. A productive player for them at key times in the year. Gregor McKellar along the offensive line. Peter Nicastro. The Argos know what they're doing in the first round here, guys.
Yeah, this is a team that finds itself, though, in a different situation because they have done so well in recent years in terms of managing their Canadians, building that Canadian depth. Again, no secret to how to be successful in this league, right? The teams that have been good in terms of their Canadians have done well. The teams that have struggled in that department haven't done so well. But I think the thing that has gone along with that success is other teams picking off a bunch of their players. You look at how many Canadians, no team lost more Canadian players in free agency this offseason than did the Toronto Argonauts. So I'm not going to call it a rebuild because the cupboard is far from bare, but they've got some flexibility in terms of where they can go because they're not overloaded the way they might have been a year ago.
And the only futures pick that they've taken really has been Jared Wayne within the last 3 drafts, right? Like, this is a team that typically is taking players to come in and try to contribute fairly quickly, and I think that's going to stick here as well because you don't need to take somebody, well, hey, let's see if we can get, big body defensive linemen that might never show up. I think we're in a groove, we're coming off a Grey Cup, we like our roster, and we want to keep rolling. And they're up against it because free agency was not kind to them this year, not just the Canadians, but across the board. And so I'm excited to see what they decide to go with here.
When I looked at their roster, I think they need a little bit more depth on defense at the national position, so we'll see if that maybe plays out. But can I stand on a table right now and say can you guys please get Kevin Mattel more touches? Like that is an amazing football player. Yep. I don't know how they work that out. You know, they've got David Unger there. They've got some other Herjay Mael. They got some good Canadian receivers, but that kid is dynamic. Let's get him more touches.
Well, a change at the safety spot for them as well this year, and Jackson Finley's right there. He's a Vancouver guy, but played at Western, so might be a good fit at this point. You know, you talk about defensive potential starting guys, and that's as ready a player in the secondaries we're going to find in this draft.
Here's a name, Sage Dockstader.
Dockstader, yep.
Like, that's a name. He was great on tape a couple years ago. I thought that was a great pick by the Argonauts, getting him a little bit later in the draft, say, hey, we're going to wait for this guy. It'd be interesting to see what happens with him. I think he's a spectacular offensive lineman who can fit in with that crew.
Well, you look at that group and what they're doing with the ratio. Ryan Hunter moves to tackle late last year and does so well that this becomes a full-time change, right? So we anticipate Hunter at tackle, but that becomes an easier move because they brought Dockstader in late last year. You know you've got him in camp as a guy who you believe can also play tackle. There's depth there. Whether they end up starting both of them, who knows? But they're in a pretty good position.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to the commissioner, we do want to check in Ottawa as GM Sean Burke gets a chance to discuss his top pick. This is the first time since 1991 that 2 receivers have been taken in the top 3 of the draft. Here's the Red Blacks GM.
Sean, Keelin White at number 3. Take us through the decision. Why?
Yeah, extremely happy to get Keelin at 3, really at the top of our board, and productive. Obviously at school you guys can see the stats and everything, but just his journey, who he is, the leadership, talking to the Montana program and what he meant to that program, and the versatility. I truly think he, between his intelligence on the field and the ability to play inside and out, he gives us a lot of options with offensive, depending on what role it is, be it starting or a backup role, to have a guy that has played multiple positions, has the capacity to learn those positions and have that. It just gives us a ton of flexibility.
How nice is it to know you're bringing in a guy that didn't have a drop last year?
Yeah, I like to think we have some pretty sure-handed receivers, but you can never have enough, right? And like I said, I don't know how much you guys know about him, but he bet on himself to go to Montana, had scholarship offers to every youth sports school. His father said he had 1 year to earn a scholarship at Montana, and by week 3 of the season, he was starting over 2 scholarship guys brought in at the same time. So just talking to him, getting to know him through this process and everything, just thoroughly enjoyed that we can have him join our room.
Some mocks had him at number 1. Were you a little surprised that he was still there?
Yeah, you never know how things are going to go, right? And, you focus on yourself. And we don't do a lot of mocks here. We focus on our process and put our board together and really critique things and who makes sense. And you got to know who's coming into your room. We feel we've made some decisions throughout my time here to have a certain type of person in this room. And to get to that next level, you want more and more of those people. And he's one of those, we believe.
And is he a player that can push for a starter's role right away?
Yeah, absolutely. You know how I feel is no matter what, guys need time, and he's been down in the U.S. a bit, and we don't want to feel we're pushing rookies in the roles, but skill set wise and everything, you want to have competition at camp. Iron sharpens iron, and we feel he definitely has the capabilities to do that.
Thanks to AJ Jakubik from TSN Radio in Ottawa for that interview. Now with the Argos pick in the first round, here's the commissioner.
With the 7th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Toronto Argonauts pick Jeremiah Ojo, defensive lineman, Montreal. Calgary, you are now on the clock.
Jeremiah Ojo will attend minicamp with the New York Giants, but is expected to be in the CFL this year. And the speed, 4.59 in the 40 for a defensive lineman at the combine. That really stood out.
Yeah, and this is one of the guys that I find the most intriguing in this draft, in that he's somewhat unique when you talk about players coming out of the province of Quebec, and particularly guys coming through the Laval or Montreal Carabin program. Because typically you think of those players because they've played Cégep football a number of years at a high level. Obviously, the resources that they have at those schools, you often think of those players as being close to their ceiling. The wild thing about Jeremiah Ojo is prior to going to Montreal, a perennial Vanier Cup contender, he'd only played a half dozen games of CEGEP football. He was a basketball guy first. And it was great talking to him about this experience. But one of the things I love here is you've got a fantastic athlete, a guy who has been well coached for the last number of years, has played so many games at a high level in that very competitive conference, but still there's some untapped potential there. And, you know, obviously a fit when you look at Toronto having lost Robbie Smith in free agency to bring in a Canadian defensive end who has that high ceiling.
The testing element at the Combine obviously was super impressive because he's in the 99th percentile in the 40-yard dash ever for defensive linemen when it comes to being 246 pounds. It's just crazy. But for me, it's more so about the fact that he's a well-rounded athlete, and I think a lot of it does come from that basketball background. It's the getting lateral, having a variety of different pass rush moves. You love to see, Lapo, the athleticism come out on actual game film and show a little bit of everything that he can do at a high level. I agree with you, Dwayne. I think there's a much higher ceiling here. And the thing I liked about him the most, honestly, at the Combine, seeing him in person for the first time, he just plays free. Like, he kind of plays the game with a lot of joy. He was bouncing around and having fun with the guys. And then it was like, well, it's time to go to work. Bang. And he would just take off because it was instinctual. So he's got a lot of work, I think, to do to become a full-time perennial starter, all the rest in this league. But all of the skills are there, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah, the hardest transition for defensive ends from the U Sports level up to the CFL level is you have to have some, you guys have talked about the speed. You know, you have to have the ability to run around these athletic offensive linemen. He does that very well. He's what's called fast twitch. He uses his hands well to keep people off him. And then I just loved everything about him. We interviewed him, and I thought he was great in the interview. I actually spent time with him at the airport and sat with him. He's going to be a great representative of our league, and he was an impressive individual.
And one of the things that stands out to me a little bit as we talk about that untapped potential is to realize untapped potential, a player has to be coachable. And one of the things I liked about our conversation with Jeremiah during the Combine was he talked a lot about the coaching he received in college. And the gentleman who coached him, Jean-Samuel Blanc, who you guys may remember having played for the Montreal Alouettes, played mostly as a fullback in the CFL. I think a lot of people forget. Jean-Samuel Blanc set a youth sports record for sacks as a defensive end with the Carabins as a player before switching positions in the CFL. So this is a guy who has demonstrated he's coachable, and that's huge.
Always pumping up fullbacks. Always pumping.
Never have too many.
One more pick in the first round of the draft that belongs to Calgary. Their second pick of the round. We will check in and count down when we come back. Calgary Stampeders, with the first overall pick in the draft, took Damien Alford. They've got one more. This pick originally belonged to the BC Lions. The Lions gave this pick up because of salary cap violation, so Calgary gets the pick. It goes to the bottom of the round. And with that pick, here's Commissioner Stuart Johnson.
With the 8th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Calgary Stampeders select Christopher Fortin, offensive lineman, Connecticut. Hamilton, you are now on the clock.
Fortin didn't necessarily become a full-time starter until his senior season, but still graded out very well in that 1 year at Connecticut, Dwayne.
Yeah, and this is a guy who I think on most people's boards, if Tiger Shanks was the #1 offensive lineman, this was #2, as guys we anticipated seeing in the first round of this draft. And a great pick, I think, for the Calgary Stampeders, who we talked about them having needs to fill. And I look at their offseason, a little bit of the free agency often becomes a game of musical chairs. Yeah. Right? And in terms of the interior offensive linemen, Calgary loses a terrific one in the offseason in Sean McEwen. They were kind of the team that didn't get one back in free agency. And so to get one early in the draft and a guy who projects as being ready to play relatively early in his Canadian Football League career, I think makes this a terrific fit for the Stampeders.
And off the top of this draft, I said, I wonder whether or not there's a real run on offensive linemen, because we had Tiger Shanks somewhere mixed in with Christopher Fortin. We thought, hey, probably first-round talents, but which one will go where and when and how quickly? And when the first one comes off, how quickly does the second go? Maybe the last couple of picks, you could have taken somebody like Christopher Fortin, but I think this is a pretty good fit because there were other team needs for the teams that picked in between Shanks alongside Fortin here. The 34-inch arms, 12 pressures, as you saw, 3 quarterback hits and no sacks. Calgary was one of 4 CFL teams that were at his pro day at UConn. Not a full-time starter until his final year, but plenty of growth still possible. And then I guess the question I have is, has he already hit his athletic peak? Because he doesn't have these crazy athletic traits, but he just seems to get to the second level and slide and make great blocks.
Yeah, well, the first thing, he doesn't have to change position. He's going to play as an interior player. That's what I like about him. This guy moves his feet and he moves people. This guy does a really good job of getting underneath people and running them. They run a lot of outside zone at UConn. Like, I was impressed with him on tape. He understands zone blocking, and there's so much zone blocking up in the Canadian Football League. He understands how to help his tackle, how to help his center when he needs to. That's an important key for him. Now, the biggest thing for him, I call this guy a salary cap fixer. Why? Because you're going to take this guy right now and you're going to say, hey, listen, all right, in 1 year, we're replacing a high-priced offensive lineman and we're going to play this guy. I think he's one of few O-linemen that can, in 2 years, step into a starting role and you can release maybe a veteran older guy, right? Sorry, Calgary, veteran older guys. I didn't mean for any of you guys to get cut here, but, the only question is, UConn didn't do a lot of pass protection. So, it was a lot of run-pass option. We got to see if he can be a good pass protector. That was my one concern. But this is a really good pick. He's going to be a good run blocker in our league.
Well, and they got a starter out of the draft in the first round last year in Christina Canu. So now 2 young guys that can build that offensive line around, and they need to get younger and fresher, as you mentioned. Here's a look at the first round of the draft, and as we mentioned, 2 receivers taken in the top 3 picks. That's the first time that's happened since 1991. 2 offensive linemen also taken here. Tiger Shanks at 5, Christopher Fortin at 8. And that's significant because Jim Barker said an offensive lineman wasn't going to go in the first round of the draft. So here with his thoughts on the first round, here's Jim.
Instead, Farhan, of saying, wow, he had almost the whole thing, you're going to say the 2 offensive linemen. Okay, I had Shanks at 9, you're right, and I had Fortin at 11, so you're right, I missed 2 offensive linemen. We got a couple good players left, though. Marshall had mentioned defensive backs. Jackson Finley from Western. Brooks Finley is his uncle, played in Calgary, he's played in the league. That family has history. He's going to go fairly quickly. Jaylen Smith, I thought he might go a little sooner. He's a linebacker who can flat run. He's going to be a great teamer. He's going to go early in this round. We still have some linemen. Erik Anderson is going to be on that list. Erik Anderson from Western, of course. I can't give him any credit. So, like I say, we got an interesting second round. I think that it's going to be a little bit more geared. There's going to be a couple offensive linemen taken this time. I'll say that. And like I say, I'm anxious to see where Jackson Finley. I thought Winnipeg was going to take him. Smart guy, going to med school. He can play those match coverages. And when William Stanback comes roaring through the B gap, a guy like Jackson Finley, he's going to come up and whack him for no gain. There's also Nate Boschman out of Calgary, same kind of safety. So Marshall was right. There's some good defensive backs. Eric Cumberbatch. 3 names to think about. DBs maybe in the second round.
There you go. DBs were one of the strengths of this draft. We're surprised to get through the first round without that. Let's see if Hamilton goes there. We'll head to Steeltown when we come back for the second pick of the Ticats. May 24th will be the 5th edition of the CFC Prospects game for the first time. The game will be played in Hamilton, and I'm joined by a quartet of players from that game. Mateo Capolongo, an offensive lineman from Football North. We've got Darren Armstrong from Hamilton. He'll play on the defensive line. Defensive back Scott Barkley from Ottawa, and from Football North, quarterback Brandon Bailey. Mateo, let's start with you. Now, you play against top American competition all the time at Football North. You've already got your first NCAA offer at Central Michigan. So what are you most looking forward to about this game?
So for this game, it's very personal to me because it shows that all the work I've put in the background has really been paying off. I'm very proud to represent Football North and my family from coming here and being here. And just for me, not being here is just not enough. I want to come here to compete, to dominate, and to prove what I'm made of, to keep on building towards future dreams and continue to get more scholarships.
Darren, for you, you got 3 years of high school football left. Your bench is already over 400. Your squad is already over 600.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what you're going to look like at that point. So what are you looking forward to as far as this game goes?
I'm looking forward to just showcasing my talent and what I've built over the last couple of years. I'm not from a sports family, but I've built everything from the ground up, and I'd like to showcase that at this game. I'm excited to dominate, and I'm excited to show out.
Scott, how about you? You showed really well in testing at the Ottawa testing event for CFC. So are you a great tester? Are you a great player? What are we going to see from you in the defensive secondary?
I'm hoping to be a leader on the field, and I'm saying the testing reflects how I play on the field. I'm a fast-paced player.
Brandon, you go to a place which is known for producing great quarterbacks. We had Larry Justanis, who was the original coach. Now Edgar Garcia works with the offense. How much do you gain in that environment that you're going to put on display in Hamilton?
Being around the coaches I have, Edgar Garcia, Jamie Lewan, Coach Jay, just kind of have taught me what it means to be a great football player, what it means to, excel in not only the football, in the weight room, in the classroom. They're always pushing me, bringing me to study hall. In the weight room, they're always making me go to that final rep, making me give 100%. And then just on the football side, just being in an environment where they're able to put me against the best players possible, what I believe is the best players in Canada, and people that can push me further and lead me to my dreams and to succeed.
4 weeks to go before the big game, and I somehow have a feeling, guys, that over the next 6-7 years, we're going to be talking about these guys here on CFL Draft Day. Now let's take a look at the second round of this year's CFL Draft. Let's take a look. Hamilton with their second pick here at the top of round 2. And then Edmonton and BC, remember them? They didn't get a pick in the first round. They will here at 10 and 11. Ottawa, Saskatchewan, Montreal, Winnipeg, Toronto, and then Calgary again. And then we get the bonus picks to wrap things up. Winnipeg and BC at 18 and 19. And now with Hamilton's picks, here is the commissioner.
With the 9th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Hamilton Tiger Cats select Isaiah Bagnah, defensive lineman, BYU. Edmonton, you are now on the clock.
Isaiah Bagnah with 50 college games, 110 tackles. Maybe didn't test as well as many expected at the Big 12 Pro Day, same at the Combine, but there's still some ceiling here for this player.
Yeah, there is, and certainly a guy, as you alluded to, that I think probably everybody wanted to see a little bit more from at the CFL Combine in particular, but he had come from the Big 12 Pro Day, a little bit tweaked, hurt himself in testing, and that left him unable to participate in some of the contact stuff at the Combine. But this is a guy who has played at a couple D1 schools, Boise State prior to BYU, has had a productive career. You like his frame, certainly, and for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, we saw them take Devin Veresuk, a linebacker, in the first round, now going D-line in the second round. They sort of let go of all their Canadian defensive linemen, or most of the Canadian defensive linemen prior to last season. When you think about Mo Diallo, Mason Bennett, guys that had been high picks that had been there for a couple of years. They brought in Luke Brubaker last year from Wilfrid Laurier, continue to add to that and hopefully give themselves a little bit of ratio flexibility on the defensive side of the ball here.
And what we talked about with the Devin Veresuk pick was kind of like building right down the middle, right? Because you have to try and build from the middle out most of the time defensively. I mean, they got a great back end this year. If anybody's looked at the CFL.ca top of the depth chart articles, you go, really? They got all of those pieces on the backs? Okay, we can go down in the line in the trenches a little bit here. So Isaiah Bagnah, to me, the interesting part when you talk about his frame is the weight gain, right? Like, what is his natural fit positionally? How are they going to use him? Because he's not Mohamed Diallo's builds. He's not really an outside end that's going to be a depth guy or working alongside Luke Brubaker moving forward. So where his actual slot is, what they want to do with him, I'm a little bit intrigued by this pick, Lapo, because I don't think that there's that true home run. Devin Veresuk's a middle linebacker, and he's going to be great pretty quickly. I think this one is, they're going to have to feel it out in training camp and see where he goes.
Yeah, maybe lose a little bit of weight, because he is athletic. And you saw at times on his college film, they took him off playing defensive end, and they put him as a linebacker at times. So in their 3-4 packages, they kept him in the game. So, Hamilton's hoping, hey, can we develop this guy to take 10 to 12 reps a game to make sure you can give your starters a little bit of a breather. I think last year Ted Govaya brought in Owen Hubert, right, from McMaster came with him from Winnipeg. So they got 2 defensive ends there. This another depth defensive end to see who can get me 10 or 12 plays and get started as a break.
All right, that's it for Hamilton in the first 2 rounds. Let's take a look at Edmonton for the first time tonight. This is what they've done in the second round in the last 5 years. DK Bonhomme, Bradley Hladek, Jacob Taylor, Jacob Plumenden, Grant McDonald, Alan Paye. Not many of these guys necessarily with Edmonton now, but it's Elks 2.0. Edmonton has had Ed Hervey as the GM before, but this is the second time through in that role, so a new regime there along with Mark Killam. What's going to define this group? Because they brought in a lot of Canadians at free agency.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about the situation in Hamilton where Ed Hervey had been GM the past couple of years, and he was hamstrung. Ratio-wise, they just did not have enough Canadian starters. So what's the first thing Ed did in free agency this year? Went out and signed a half dozen guys who could be immediate starters. Re-signed Trey Ford at quarterback, who gives them another Canadian starter. So this is all stuff that was taken care of in the offseason, was spending some money to ensure they're in a good position as far as their Canadians. Listen, when you look at their 2025 draft, they've already got Zach Mathis, right? Last year's supplemental draft, which ends up being this year's first-round pick. That's a great start to the 2025 draft for them. But they obviously need to continue to build. They look to make their Canadians a position of strength. It's obvious by what they did in free agency. So again, this is another team I expect. Be aggressive, go out and get the best players, because that was clearly what their mission was in free agency.
And I had the thought when they were so aggressive in free agency so quickly, I'm like, if you only came home in free agency with Robbie Smith and Tyrell Ford, you'd be like, we're good. Those are two guys that can start immediately and make a major impact for you on your roster. Get after the quarterback, get interceptions, make big plays up and down the field. And then they just kept checking off this need and that need and more as it went down. So I'm impressed by what they've been able to do. I mean, some people have been criticizing a little bit of maybe the cost of reaching for some of those guys and trying to bring so many in-house. Reality is, it really doesn't matter the bottom line until you get to training camp, right? There's still a lot of cards, I think, to be dealt here, and whoever they select in this spot is going to be thrown into the fire very quickly in competition in training camp.
I would say this. I thought Ed Hervey did one of the best jobs in the Canadian Football League to get national roster flexibility, like you just talked about, Dwayne. So listen to these national names they signed in free agency. David Baird, starter, right? Robbie Smith, we already talked about. Royce Metier, Gregor McKellar, Tyrell Ford, Keon Julian Grant. All those guys have been starters and played significant games. So those are 6 nationals that can step in, and that's what you need from a flexibility standpoint. And I know there's a lot of talk, well, you gave up on Eugene Lewis, one of the best receivers in the CFL.
A superstar.
Yes, so you got rid of that guy, but look, you got 6 players that give you roster flexibility at a national position. That is crucial. That's why they did a great job in the offseason. I thought that was spectacular.
Well, I think one of the other things that's going to be interesting to see, and I know one of the other things that was certainly part of Ed's MO in terms of the people he went out and got in free agency, it's important to them to have people who want to be in Edmonton, people who want to be part of the Elks program. You know, you look just off the top of your head without even thinking deeply about it. David Baird, a U of A guy, started his career in Edmonton. That's from his area. I know watching David after games in Hamilton, always had family around.
Probably
I think it's important to him to be close.
I don't know how he
I mean, got traded to Hamilton, and obviously I thought his career really took off during his time in Hamilton. But Tyrell Ford, do you think he wants to play with his brother? Hell yeah. This is a guy that wants to be in Edmonton. They've got good citizens. The culture is really important to what they're trying to do there, and having people who want to be there. I expect this pick to reflect that.
Well, and then you look at how this has been impacted cap-wise, because they didn't overpay for Trey Ford or even Cody Fajardo. That gave them some of the flexibility they needed to bring some of these other players in. They lost Gino Lewis. Oh, they just picked up Alex Hollins. Might not be Lewis's pedigree, but if he's healthy, he can certainly give them something because he's been a 1,000-yard receiver. Now with the Elks pick, here's the commissioner.
With the 10th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Edmonton Elks select Darien Newell, defensive lineman, Queens. BC, you are now on the clock.
Darien Newell eventually wants to be a broadcaster. Hopefully his football play is good enough at the CFL level that we are safe for a while here on this panel. But, you know, you could just go anywhere if you're Edmonton right now because they don't have a glaring area of need.
Is it just me, or did the new commissioner just put a little extra sauce on the word Queens? I'm just saying. No, Darien Newell, this is a guy that I really like in this draft. A guy who deferred from last year, would have been a high pick in the draft any of the last couple of years. Incredibly gifted athlete on an interior defensive lineman's frame where you don't necessarily see that. Facing double teams regularly at the college level. I think this is a guy who is capable of being very disruptive as an interior defensive lineman in the Canadian Football League. A leader, high character player, which is something that's important for Edmonton. A guy we didn't expect to see still on the board at this stage of the draft, but he's there. They step in and grab him.
I love it because if you end up using your supplemental pick and you don't get your first-round pick the next season, well, you might as well just go and get somebody who's a first-round graded talent by most people across the board, I would say, here to start the second round. I love this selection for them, and it's aside from the depth and necessarily where you're going with your roster construction and all the rest, if you just watch Darien Newell, in my opinion, like I got a chance to at the Combine on Saturday morning, there was an inside run session before he had to leave for personal reasons. And Dwayne, you and I were standing down there, and I'm not joking, folks, when I say it was 5 or 6 or 7 plays in a row that would have been tackle for loss. And it's just every single time it was a different slice inside here. Oh, read the play there. Oh, got that leverage on that offensive guard here. So to me, as somebody who has 37 games played at Queens and pretty amazing production, 92 tackles, 18 quarterback sacks over his career, he's athletically gifted, but he also just understands he has a great football IQ and I think a real sense for that first step of where's the line going and where can I disrupt? And then he's got the power to finish. And that's what you have to have in order to play quickly.
Yeah, and if you're going to be an interior guy, he'll be a over-the-center nose guard. You have to have girth. You have to be able to penetrate the line of scrimmage. And he was, in Combine, he was the disruptor of that crew and forcing the tailback back every time. He's talented. I loved what he said. And when we interviewed him, he talked about, I went down to Texas, and when I was in Texas, I was playing all these Division I football players, these FBS guys, and I really got the confidence that I can continue to play at the next level because I performed so well down there. And it was interesting. The other thing he talked about, some of the guys at Queens that really helped him develop. He said he had a COVID year where, I really just to hang out with Anthony Federico. And he basically, another Queens player playing in the CFL, he's like, that guy helped me develop, helped me grow as a football player. And I thought he was a humble guy, and I think he'll have a good long career and play, as you say, interior of the defensive line. Get somebody who can stop the middle of the defensive line.
Another player who still has some ceiling because he didn't even begin football until his final year of high school. That's Edmonton's first pick. We'll take you to BC for their first pick. The Lions had to wait out the first round. Here they are in round 2, looking to improve on 9-9.
BC Lions, led by Kid Canada himself. Look at this. Down the field, has a man. Touchdown, Eberhardt. To his left, staying on his feet and into the end zone. It's McKinnis. Okay, I'm saying it now. Nathan Rourke is back. Nowhere to go on that play. Ben Hladek with the denial. It's Hladek. They're going to blow him down, but an interception for the BC Lions.
Here's a look at the last 5 second-round picks for the Lions. Theo Benedette still in the NFL. Ezekiel Tiede last year did contribute. Some guy named Rourke down there at number 20. That was actually picked by Ed Hervey. Alaric Jackson still in the NFL, so maybe not necessarily a ton of mileage yet for the Lions from the second round, but this is also a team that feels pretty good about its Canadian depth. They've got plenty of it. They've got the bonus pick later because of how much they play Canadians, but nonetheless, when you're 9-9 in BC, that led to a lot of change, so this is an important draft.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where they go. Obviously, Ryan Rigmaiden's first draft as the general manager of the BC Lions, and you sort of look to establish your identity, chart your course, so to speak. So Good luck to Ryan with his first pick. I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes with this one.
And obviously, this is the first selection that they're making at 11th. They don't pick again until 19th, which is that bonus pick that Fran's talking about. But like, we were kind of staying there at the combine. There's so many different members of the BC Lions personnel team around, and I remember saying to you, man, they got to just be waiting to find somebody that they hope is going to be there at this point. So they want to make the most of this pick. That's why it doesn't feel like a futures thing to me. You want to get somebody in-house quickly.
Yeah, and one of the things this team did that a lot of other teams didn't do is they started the back half of the season 3 American offensive linemen. So do they try to fix that and start, they lost Shuk Chung, George Una, first-round pick from last year. They really like him. But are they going to maybe try to get that ratio back to 2 people, right, playing up front?
With the Lions' first pick of the evening in the second round, here's the commissioner.
With the 11th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the BC Lions select Hayden Harris, defensive lineman, Montana. Ottawa, you are now on the clock.
Keelin White's teammate at the University of Montana from nearby Mill Creek, Washington. However, a player that's got an undrafted free agent contract with the Buffalo Bills. Not a minicamp invite, so he's not going to be with the Lions at training camp in all likelihood at any point this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with Hayden Harris, but it's not surprising to see the BC Lions, as Lapo alluded to the way that they use their Canadians. You talk about them starting 3 Americans on the offensive line. It's because they have Canadians playing what I'll call non-traditional positions
on defense,
at times, right? And for a stretch of last season, starting a Canadian and Adrian Green at the strong side halfback spot. At one point, they started 3 Canadian linebackers. Patrice Rene spent a number of games at the nickel linebacker spot. So this is a team that has demonstrated, with a lot of the same people still involved in the decision making there, that they're going to play the best players, play them in their natural positions. They've been a team that has already built some Canadian depth at D-line. You've got Matthew Betts at defensive end, Hayden Harris a natural fit, and they've got depth at the defensive line that there's not necessarily that urgency for him to be there when you look at the contract with the Bills.
I almost wonder about that in terms of salary cap management based on what happened this past year, right? I know it's a new year, things reset, you move forward, but they have an embarrassment of riches at this point at defensive line, and it almost makes me think like they just want to take somebody who's a high-end caliber talent that they don't really want to see right away because they have so much going on at this point. But
that was a factor last year in the Theo Benedette decision.
Absolutely.
Right? Not having to pay another guy that highly in the draft.
Francis Bemme, Matthew Betts, Nathan Cherry, Christian Covington, Riley Pickett, Deshaun Stevens, who's a former 6th overall pick to the Ottawa Red Blacks. It's like that's a deep and talented group that can play a variety of different positions. So if and when we do end up seeing Hayden Harris, who has got this amazing length and somehow a ton of strength as well to go with all of that length, it would be great to see him mixing in and actually getting maybe a year or 2 learning next to Matthew Betts. But as you say, it's a waiting game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's played a lot of football, and I like his motor. I like his quickness. He can make plays off the edge, so put him behind Matthew Betts, develop him, and then you got a guy, like I said a couple picks ago, can he take 10 to 12 plays and replace the starters, take a break? So this is a good pick. This is a good football player. I like the effort this kid showed up on tape with.
Yeah, and this is a guy who I think used the transfer portal in a way that really benefited him, right? Started off his college career at UCLA, obviously playing at a slightly higher level, didn't necessarily get a ton of time. He moves to Montana to finish his career and does an absolutely fantastic job, improves his stock by getting on the field, being productive, really excelling at that level, and I think it's something that's going to translate to the Canadian Football League.
257 pounds, running a 4.8 flat, that's pretty impressive, Very impressive kid.
Some pretty good athletic bloodlines as well. His grandfather, David Mills, played in the NBA in the early 60s. Let's take a look at Ottawa's second-round picks in the last 5 years, and there have been a few of them. You look at Daniel Okpoko a year ago. The year before that, they had 3 in the second round. Cormier, Peter Oladejo, a couple the year before that in Hogan Saint-Don. Jesse Luketa, who's in the NFL right now. Alonzo Adai in 21. Michael Hecht, who's in the NFL. So they've had plenty of picks in that round, and they've had some production there as well.
Yeah, and obviously continuing to look and build on that. We saw Keelin White in the first round of this draft, giving them another option at receiver. So Which way do you think they go this time?
I mean, I thought Jackson Finley would have been a fun fit, even though they have that natural free safety that's already there in some depth. But when it got ravaged last year down the stretch, I mean, they didn't have a lot of places to go to cover those Argonauts receivers, which I mentioned in the first round. So, yeah, I'm interested to see. I think, linebacker you mentioned as well in the first round, Lapo, like, could that be somewhere where you add a little bit of depth, even though they have Javon Santos-Knox and Gary Johnson's been a great player for them over the years, as well as some of those other guys at weak side. But yeah, I would love to see them add defensive line if they can here, because Cleon Lang, again, is not going to play forever.
Yeah, and you make a good point about the back end. Alonzo Adai was, I was ecstatic. I was there when Alonzo Adai was available in the second round. I'm like, oh my, we may have to wait for him a little bit, but this guy's going to be, I think, a great free safety in the league. You maybe get a backup for him. Justin Howell's been in the league, but it's an older player.
Signed Tunde Adeleke,
and they got Tunde Adeleke.
Which
they did bring him in. Yeah, this is interesting what they do, whether they take some of the better offensive linemen that are still left, give them some lineman depth, the linebackers.
That's what I was wondering about.
Jaylen Smith from North Texas.
Cyril Hogan St. Don ends up obviously going to Montreal in free agency, and so you would say, well, let's go ahead and get somebody to replace him who can develop, maybe be in behind Zach Pelios or some of those swing guards that they have. But who's the player? Mm-hmm. Like, who's the one that you really love that you say in the second round, let's go get that offensive lineman because he's going to make a difference for us this year? I'm not sure that person is here.
Yeah, I mean, they addressed that offensive line a little bit in free agency as well. Peter Godber coming over from Saskatchewan, he'll move in and play that center spot. Obviously, a team that is projecting, hoping down the road maybe to start 4 Canadians on their offensive line. They are going to need some depth there eventually.
Yeah, Sam Carson and Erik Anderson, in my mind, are probably the next 2 offensive line to come on the board. But I'm gonna pound the table for Jackson Finley. How are we through 11 picks in this draft and Jackson Finley hasn't been taken yet? It's like the Shedeur Sanders of the CFL, except like the dad is pretty quiet and reserved, and no one's gonna get bent out of shape.
And the player's the most likable person that we've maybe ever
spoken to. He's gonna go to medical school, and so kind of the Canadian version, because we're all kind of humble. But truly, like we talked about this draft at the combine, right? The 4 of us got together and talked about where the strengths of this combine were. We talked about defensive line. 4 have already come off the board. We talked about defensive back. None have come off the board. And so much of that is a positional need, but also the CFL draft has produced some pretty good Canadian defensive backs in the last couple of years that are now starting, right? So if you look at Ben LaBrosse in Calgary, if you look at what BC did a year ago, there are guys across the board, and maybe teams just don't feel the need. So some pretty good players are going to get taken later on, and teams are going to feel pretty good about that value. With the next pick in the second round, here's the commissioner.
With the 12th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Ottawa Redblacks select Samuel Carson, offensive lineman, Louisiana Monroe. Saskatchewan, you are now on the clock.
Sam Carson began his career at the University of Calgary as a tackle before transferring to Louisiana Monroe. His dad's a U Sports offensive line coach. Dad and brother won Vanier Cups. They know what they're doing in Canadian football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sam Carson is a guy who grew up around the Calgary Dinos program while his dad was coaching in that program. His brother was playing there. Progressed from, as you said, started immediately, straight out of high school, started at tackle at U of C, gets an opportunity to go down and test himself against NCAA competition, plays his last couple of seasons down there, starting as a senior. Now, all of his starts in college, both north and south of the border, are as a tackle. I'm not sure he necessarily projects as that, but teams, and particularly we've talked about Ottawa's desire to play a Canadian at tackle, that you maybe look at him as a guy who, not necessarily a starter there, but a guy who can get you through a game there if need be based on what his experience has been.
And that offensive line has had so many different combinations over the last couple of years. You and I have done a ton of Red Blacks games, and it seems like every single time we're going, okay, they're flopping to here, because they've been going through it in terms of the injury woes. But I think this one for me says that, yeah, he doesn't have to be a tackle, but if you really believe in Zach Pelios, which they obviously do because it's this regime in Ottawa that's decided to make that selection a couple of years ago, they've re-upped him as well, you probably want to get somebody that you trust to fill in without having to go, I remember talking to June Jones when he was in Hamilton. He said, I'd like to be able, when somebody gets hurt, to make one change and not to have to switch 4 of my offensive line positions all over the place. I think that's what Carson gives you in this one. The question I have, though, we're talking about the whole family thing at Calgary. What are you doing leaving Calgary? How do you leave Calgary when you got the family all tied in there with all those Vanier Cups and all the rest? But I love that he wanted to challenge himself, and I love that he's got a little bit of that positional stuff that should help Ottawa in the next couple of seasons.
That's a great point. This is a guy who said, hey, I want to go to play at a higher level. He's been well coached by his father. You're right. He's a tackle in college. I surely expect him to go inside at 31-inch arms. He's going to be an inside player. He's just got to continue to develop as a run blocker. It's faster. It's weird to say this, but for the guys who play tackle when they move into guard, they don't understand how faster it is. The defensive linemen get on you faster because you can't back up as much because they got to keep the depth of the pocket. He'll have to work on that, but that's a good developmental player for the Red Blacks. Mike Gibson, O-line coach, take care of business with those guys.
All right, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are up next in the second round. Here's a look at their last 5 second-round picks. Nick Weed, linebacker, Jackson Ford, Zach Fry, Terrell Jana, Braden Lenius. At least 3 of those guys have managed to have some pretty good success in this league.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see when you look at the guys that they have selected. Again, a willingness to wait. Sometimes for players, you think about Nick Weeb, a guy who was injured coming off an ACL injury last season when he was selected. Same draft as we talked about Kyle Hergel in the first round, willing to wait for a player. So, interesting to see kind of what the Saskatchewan philosophy has been as they continue to rebuild this roster.
If you're willing to wait and you've already gone defensive line with Ali Sad here from Bowling Green, it'd be kind of fun to see Seth Hundeby go here to the Riders. I mean, that would be an excellent selection because, again, it's right down the middle of your defense. He's an absolute freak athletically. He's got some of those local roots. So I would be interested to see that if they don't go linebacker and you look towards the back end, I mean, they've already made some selections that are pretty high-end defensive backs the last couple of years. Nelson Lacombo alongside
Jackson Ford.
Exactly. And so seeing those 2 guys, I'm not sure you need to go defensive back. But again, if you want to add even more depth and get immediate special teams upside, never say never.
Yeah, the weird thing, Tavon Campbell, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that guy comes in, and he played 6 years in the NFL, and now he's back in the organization. So you're right. There's a lot. They have a lot of depth there. I'm interested to see, and this is not who they're picking, but who's going to be the left guard? Noah Zara, Zach Fry, Phil Gagnon. They brought in Brandon Knoll. Who's going to win that battle in Saskatchewan for one of those guard spots? But it's interesting because there are a lot of good defensive backs, but I don't know if that's an area need for them. And the hard part, you can keep taking those guys, but you can't keep them all on the roster.
Yeah, you look at this draft class, and typically when we talk about Canadian defensive backs, people automatically hear the word safety. Mm-hmm. Right, but we're also talking about some guys that can play corner, and with minds being opened up a little bit by the season Terrell Ford had last year. Some pretty good corners in this draft, but also when you look at Saskatchewan with the Tavon Campbell signing, a guy who you anticipate being a starting corner in this league. They also signed Taylor Elgersma from Toronto, a free agent whose natural position is corner. So they've already built themselves a little bit of security there that they're not picking from a position of need necessarily.
And a big priority for them in the last couple of years has been to rebuild that offensive line. They'll get Jamarcus Hardrick back this year, but as far as Canadians are concerned, I still think they're looking to get better. To your point, you mentioned the names.
And at the receiver position, Tommy Neal, Mitchell Picton are the only really experienced receivers on the roster, besides the starter for backups that have played some experience. So it'll be interesting to see where they go here.
All right, the pick is in. Let's head to the commissioner with the Riders, who are on the clock.
With the 13th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Saskatchewan Roughriders select Erik Anderson, offensive lineman, Western. Montreal, you are now on the clock.
First-team Canadian offensive tackle, will likely have to move to guard. Not afraid to be physical with that heavy run-blocking scheme at that school you like to talk about every year at this time.
What school is that?
The Western Mustangs, ladies and gentlemen. Erik Anderson, a 4-year starter at Western. And, one of the things that's kind of neat to me about this pick is you talk about him going to Saskatchewan. Is I remember being at Western's training camp in 2021, just taking in the ambiance, as I like to do from time to time. And
I used to hate that ambiance.
At the time, Zach Fry was sort of the big man on campus, right? Zach Fry, highly regarded Canadian Football League prospect. And I remember talking to Chris Marshall, who was coaching the offensive line there at the time, and he said, yeah, Zach's really good, but keep an eye on this kid, Erik Anderson. Mm-hmm. Erik's going into his first year as a starter, ends up starting every game in his career, and has been absolutely fantastic, and obviously projects as a starter in the not too distant future in the Canadian Football League.
It's one of my favorite conversations, by the way, because I saw Blake Nill at an East-West Bowl and said, hey, if you like my offensive lineman this year, wait until you see these two guys I got coming next year, and Giovanni Manu and all the rest. So it does happen occasionally where you go, hey, we got something stored away here. Erik Anderson, to me, I love the team fit here more than anything else, because for being a very tall and a very long man, you would expect that there would be, some bad knees and hips and stand really tall and pop out of your stance. And Lapa, I don't know if you agree with this, but like playing at Western, you have no choice but to figure out how to stay low and blow people off the football. And it seems as though he's very comfortable doing that. That will endear him to plenty of people in Riderville.
Yeah, at 6'5", 314 pounds. He plays with physicality. I think he's got to widen his base a little bit. Sometimes he's a little top heavy, but this is a physical football player. And I think with time, maybe he could go outside, right? I'm not saying right away, but maybe he eventually can go outside. Here's what I loved about him. We interviewed him. And if you remember this story, he talked about, I played hockey when I first started, playing sports. I loved hockey. And then what happened? I started getting slower at hockey. And then I got too many penalties. And then when I got all these penalties, I was like, maybe I should play football instead. So I stopped playing hockey and I started playing football. Good move on his part. Really good pick. Really good football player.
Love that story. Meanwhile, the Montreal Alouettes are on the clock. They went offensive line with their first pick. Let's see where they go with the second. Jackson Finley still on the board. I'm just saying. Here's a look at the second-round picks in the last 5 years for Montreal. David Dallaire, Radim Brown, Piola Stage, Marc-Antoine Dequoy. Plenty of high-end talent, lots of production. Keon Julian Grant. All these guys have had plenty of success in the league, and now with the upcoming second-round pick for Montreal, here's the commissioner.
With the 14th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Montreal Alouettes select Nate Boschman, defensive back, Calgary. Winnipeg, you are now on the clock.
All right, so it's not Jackson Finley, but it is another defensive back from British Columbia, so I like that. Well, and a former quarterback out of Kelowna High School.
There may quite honestly be no two players in the draft to me who are more similar than Jackson Finley and Nate Boschman. Both very similar athletically, both very similar in terms of that football IQ being a huge strength for them. Both guys that you would talk about as great citizens, great teammates off the field. One of the thoughts for me coming into this draft regarding the defensive backs. You don't often see defensive backs go at the top of the draft. The last time a first overall pick was a DB was 2008, Dylan Barker. Patrick Burke in 1993, the last one before that. But when you look at guys like Jackson Finley and obviously Nate Boschman, who's selected with this pick, you're talking about guys who are maybe two of the safest picks in the draft because you know they're going to step in and be impactful players right away on special teams. They project as players who are very capable of starting. They're going to fit into the culture of any team. They're going to be leaders. They're going to be good teammates. This is exactly what Nate Boschman brings to the table, a guy who has had an absolutely fantastic career at the University of Calgary. No pressure on him to play right away with Marc-Antoine Dequoy in Montreal, but certainly, you know, we saw Dequoy banged up a little bit at times last year. This gives high quality depth behind him in terms of a young guy who can step in and play right away.
And let's be real too, it creates competition at the backup free safety role while also getting a plus player on special teams. And I think that's a huge add for Byron Archambault's unit, which has been pretty good over the last couple of years. But you're talking about how similar Jackson Finley is alongside Nate Boschman. And to me, the one thing that might separate them is that Jackson is obviously a top-end talent, great guy, tremendous player. Nate Boschman is like a field general. Like he is barking out signals, even at the combine, the second he's getting the call. That feels like a Noel Thorpe kind of guy to me. It's like he wants his free safety on the back end, putting people in their place because, let's be real too, as a young Canadian kid, sometimes there's a big veteran American middle linebacker that you gotta go, hey, get in the right spot. Like line up where you're supposed to go. This is what the play call is. So I like the idea of him being able to run the field if Marc-Antoine Dequoy has to take a couple snaps, couple games off, all the rest. This is no slight to Arthur Hamlin, but this is an upgrade if Boschman turns into the player that we think he can based on what we've seen from his time at Calgary.
Here's why I think Nate's a great pick for this organization. 2 years ago, the Montreal Alouettes almost broke a team record, or they did break a team record for defensive scores. And that's how they've won a lot of football games. Noel Thorpe and his defense, they get defensive. Dequoy had a bunch of defensive scores. Well, this player, 4 interceptions last year, 2 return for touchdowns. Previous year, another return for a touchdown. So he is a productive football player from the back end. He fits that defense, put him in a position. You already say he's going to play special teams, but this is a guy who got great instincts and can make plays with the ball in the air. So I think he fits that unit because, yeah, this kid has shown time and time again, I can take it to the house and make plays.
Also coached collegiately by Mike Edem back in the back end, another former University of Calgary guy, so knows how to play at this level, and a President's Award winner, the National Defensive Player of the Year. Now we take it over to Winnipeg for their second pick in the upcoming draft. Let's talk a bit about the Bombers and where they need to go here, because, you know, we had talked about them potentially looking to upgrade the depth in their secondary in round 1. There may be an opportunity here as well.
Yeah, there certainly could be. They went linebacker in the first round, which of course immediately helps your special teams, gives you some flexibility defensively. I've said all along, I believe Winnipeg, when you look at what they have done historically in the draft and the way that they in recent years have deployed their Canadians, they're a best player available kind of team. So who do you believe is the best player available at this stage in the draft?
Where are my quarterbacks? Can we get a quarterback? Like, it's, you know what? I love the idea of a Curtis Rourke or a Taylor Elgersma getting a chance to come in a year, maybe 2. Maybe Zach Collaros is at the back end of his career. I mean, I might be dreaming, but I was hoping that a quarterback would go at some point in the second round. I'd love to see one of them go in this spot.
All right, Dwayne wants a fullback probably taken. Marshall wants, Jesus, okay.
For the people of Winnipeg, I want a quarterback taken.
They'll be available in the next round.
I think what's interesting about Winnipeg is, like, when you look at their roster, this is the least amount of flexibility they've had in the last couple of years. With some of those veteran players gone out the door, but they don't have the ability to start the 8, 9 Canadians. Sometimes last year they started 10 Canadians, so it'll be interesting to see where they go.
With the Bombers pick, here's the commissioner.
With the 15th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers select Jaylen Smith, linebacker, North Texas. Toronto, you are on the clock.
There were 3 linebackers near the top of the draft. 2 of them already went in the first round. This is the other, Jaylen Smith. A fast player, a physical player, can play multiple spots defensively.
Yeah, Jaylen Smith is a guy who is, as you see, a 227-pound linebacker, but a guy whose background in football is as a defensive back. That's what he was in high school when he started his college career, and demonstrated that versatility, that flexibility when he arrived at North Texas. And so a great fit for the Canadian Football League for one, in terms of that multiplicity that Canadian Football League defensive coordinators and, quite frankly, offensive coordinators like to have, showing different looks using the same groups of people, guys you can move around and so on. And so obviously a great fit in that regard. But I think when you think back, this was the fourth guy, I believe, on Jim Barker's board when we go back to the start of the draft. He's still there as we get to the middle of the second round of this draft. Fits with that best football player available thinking, and we're going to put him in positions to be successful in our lineup.
Yeah, super productive, positional flexibility, obviously a big part of it. And it's never this simple, but sometimes you just love, whether it's the Labor Day rivalries or the matchups that you get, and it's like, well, last year Saskatchewan at 32nd overall said, let's go get Malik Straker. He's a smaller guy, run around. He got 9 special teams tackles in his first year. Obviously didn't play a big role defensively. I get the sense that Winnipeg might have seen that and thought, you know what, that looks kind of fun. Why don't we go get one of those, right? And it's like, it's not a bad thing to look around the league, and it's not that it's necessarily copycat and roster building, but I do think it gives you a little bit of an idea of how we can shift our roster, because obviously once you go out and get Connor Shay, you have a bit of a plan moving forward, and now they're not going to play the same spot necessarily moving forward, but you're just adding to that depth and starting to shift, as you say, with the limited amount of resources that they have currently compared to what they've had in the past. You're shifting things in a different direction.
Yeah, a little bit of a hybrid guy. I don't expect him to play a nickel or a Sam linebacker at 224 pounds, but a very productive special teams player, a physical player when you see him making plays on tape. And I had the opportunity to talk to his head coach. His head coach is a guy named Eric Morris, who spent the 2009 season with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. I got to coach him for one season, and this is what Eric said about him. He's like, when I got here, this was the guy we put on a pedestal week after week and showed people, if you put practice tape on like this, it's going to show up on game film. And he talked about the work ethic of this player was amazing. So Jaylen Smith is going to be somebody that you get into that building that will become a leader of the special teams, and then figure out where else can you be in other packages. I know the Bombers like to do. The one thing the Bombers do, they utilize their defensive talent. They get the talented football players on the field. They don't just say, we run 4 down linemen. Yeah. Sometimes they put extra linebackers in the game. He'd be perfect when they don't want to rush the pass, they want to rush 3 and drop everybody else in coverage. He'd be perfect in one of those roles.
4 more picks in the second round. Next up, the defending Grey Cup champion Toronto Argos. They lost a lot of Canadians this offseason. They went defensive line in round 1. We'll see where they go in round 2.
Well, the first. Bowling Green, very
We'll get to the Argos momentarily. Again, Erik Anderson, Saskatchewan's pick in the second round of this draft. Let's check in with General Manager Jeremy O'Day about this election.
Well, Jeremy, we'll just start off simple. You picked Erik Anderson, Ali Saad. What you like about them?
Well, the first pick, Ali Saad, just somebody that's versatile, has versatility to play inside and outside. Played both that at Bowling Green. Very productive, physical player. That's a playmaker type defensive lineman. We're excited to get him. Powerful player that is able to shed offensive linemen and play physical. So great to add a guy like that to our defensive front. And then Erik Anderson, another guy obviously high on our board. Someone that played left tackle at Western, was two-time All-Canadian, and very athletic, has the ability to play multiple positions, and we'll add to the offensive line room. And you have to build through the offensive line, protect the quarterback. So we're excited about the guys we took.
Did you expect them both at camp?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. It's a little early, but we're expecting them.
Okay, they're not NFL prospects in that respect?
Not at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
One of them's going to minicamp. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I guess do you feel like you've addressed at least the biggest needs that you felt the team had going into today?
Again, as I said pre-draft, I feel like we're in a position where we could be flexible with where we took our players, and ultimately we decided, as I usually do, stay with our draft board, and we had those guys ranked really high, and but they'll certainly come in and compete with the guys we have, and competition's a good thing.
Which one's going to minicamp?
Erik Anderson's going to minicamp.
What team?
I think the Giants. Yeah.
Did you talk to Sad tonight? Have you called him?
Corey did. Yeah.
Okay. And is he excited?
No, he's not. yeah, very excited.
Okay.
Very excited. We just so everyone knows, we interview these guys many times before we draft them. But he's very excited to be drafted, and we're excited to have him.
Who was at his pro day?
At his pro day was Larry Dean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we'll let your.
We were going to the Argos, but now we will go to the BC Lions. We have got a trade. The Lions have moved up 3 spots from 19 to 16. They will take the Argos pick there. They'll also get the Argos pick at number 37 in the 4th round. Toronto gets BC's pick. This is the bonus pick for playing the additional Canadians. That's the number 19 spot. Toronto gets that, and then they'll move up to get the 29th pick in the 4th round as well. So with the BC Lions' second pick in this round, here's the commissioner.
With the 16th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the BC Lions select Jackson Finley, defensive back, Western. Calgary, you are now on the clock.
The hometown boy, Jackson Finley, coming back to BC, played his high school football in the province. We've talked about him already. You will not find a more quality player, and there's plenty of quality people in this draft. He wants to be a doctor at some point down the road, and now he's going to try to fit in the secondary with Christophe Beaulieu, who BC's very big on as well.
Yeah, and a West Coast guy you see from North Vancouver, BC, becomes the 4th generation of his family to play in the Canadian Football League. Absolutely remarkable. Jackson Finley, one of the high-end athletes in this draft, but not just an athlete playing football, an incredibly intelligent sideline-to-sideline, impactful football player throughout his career at Western. One of the things that stands out to me about Jackson Finley, and another one of those tie-ins with Nate Boschman, I've kind of described in this draft 2003 as being the magic number, right? Because this is the first draft in which players born in 2003 are eligible. The 2003s eligible for this draft are the guys who used their first year of eligibility in 2021 as 18-year-olds. Nate Boschman, one of those guys at 2003. Jackson Finley, a late birthday. Jackson Finley played on a Vanier Cup championship team at Western as a 17-year-old. And you consider that season, that 2021 season, that's the first year after COVID, right? So many guys came back to school to play their last year. There was probably no year where it was harder for true freshmen to get on the field. So the guys that did, it speaks to how high-end they are. And Jackson Finley at 17 years old, competing against guys who are into, in some cases, really their 6th year of university football, speaks volumes.
Yeah, and Greg Marshall, I remember calling the Yates Cup this year. It was at Wilfrid Laurier, and he said, like, we don't use Jackson on a ton of special teams. He's playing them all immediately. And then I asked Jackson at the Combine, I'm like, hey, like, did you just play specials most of the time? Like, go back through the film and see. He's like, no, I've been playing the whole time. He's like, I'm on a little bit of everything. I'm like, well, that's only going to help you moving forward. So he understands how he's going to fit into this. And for me, seeing him go head-to-head against Taylor Elgersma from Wilfrid Laurier in that Yates Cup, as much as Western lost, it was so much fun to see them playing the chess match, right, at free safety. And the range of Jackson Finley is pretty special. The only reason, let's be clear about this too, that he is here at this point has to be because people were scared that not only is he a great football player and a great person, he's going to have a great career once he's done playing football. That had to factor in to him not going soon to Lapo, because this is, to me, this is a first-round talent through and through.
And you watch him on tape, he's physical, he's very athletic, and I think you said it very well. Sometimes people just put a free safety, you stay deep, don't get beat deep. This guy needs to play around the box because he is good he can come down and tackle you and hit you with some physicality. And I think the thing you get out of this football player is, when you talk to him at Combine, he says, I love the ability to be the free safety who makes checks and changes coverages. And to understand that, sometimes free safeties are going to be in a position when, as all of a sudden we go to a 4-by-1 set, 4 receivers to the field, 1 to the boundary, well, he's going to tell everybody, no, we're playing this coverage. He enjoys that. That was growing up in his system. That is what he's going to have to do at this level. And the biggest thing, you talked about him starting at 17. He's only 21 years old, so he can play a long time. And don't underestimate BC trading up to get this player. Does that give him 2 more years of playing as he's working on his medical degree? Because he can start the process at home. So much easier to do that at home than in Regina or somewhere else.
Or on the billboards in Vancouver, Nathan Rourke, Jackson Finley, side by side. You can see them, right?
You can't apart. We mentioned the pedigree. His grandfather played 12 years for the BC Lions and was a 2-time All-Star. So, and his dad, Anthony Finley, is going to be really proud. He owns a gym, Level 10 Fitness. The guy knows how to train. At the East-West game a year ago, 4.31. 4.31 in the 40. They didn't believe it. They asked him to run it again. 4.31 again. Calgary Stampeders, meanwhile, we've seen what they've done in this draft so far with Damian Alford and Chris Fortin. They've got 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. Here's the commissioner with the next one.
With the 17th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Calgary Stampeders select Quincy Vaughn, tight end, North Dakota. Winnipeg, you are on the clock.
And Stu referred to him as a tight end. Might he be an H-back? He could be a short yardage quarterback. He began his career as a quarterback. He's got a bunch of rushing touchdowns in short yardage. He can do a lot of different things, and this is the type of player that the league wants to take more and more advantage of. Football North guy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that as we get into the second round, obviously you interviewed the players participating in the Canada Football Chat prospect game leading into this round. Brandon Bailey, a quarterback from Football North. That's exactly what Quincy Vaughn was. Went down to North Dakota originally as a quarterback. Played the traditional quarterback position, threw the ball a little bit, but eventually really specialized as their short yardage quarterback, wanting to get him and his athleticism on the field a little bit more. He ends up moving to tight end. And, I think a guy who has that quarterback mentality and mindset and sees the game through those eyes, but plays another position, can be so valuable. And I know as a quarterback, you tend to love having those kind of guys on the field because they're going to be in the right place all the time.
Yeah, I love it just because he might not be playing the position, but you call anything from anywhere, and especially a lot of the things that Dave Dickinson does with that offense, right? It's slicing blocks and kicking with the backside and bomber blocks, all this kind of stuff. You want somebody who's stood 7 yards back from the center and understands, okay, this guy's going to cross my face. I got to time up my cadence. He's never going to get hit by a snap when he's waggling across the ball pre-snap because he's going to know from his time playing quarterback, this is what it's all about. The other thing I like about this is maybe Calgary saw Antti Litre leave and go to Hamilton and do the short yardage stuff, and they were like, damn, I want one of those, right? I want to have a short yardage quarterback who understands it. Tommy Stevens obviously gone in free agency to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You have Vernon Adams Jr. You don't want to get him beat up at any point throughout the season, taking an unnecessary hit. And so maybe you just decide to backfill that and go, hey, this guy can do a variety of different things for us, because let's be honest, too, this is earlier than we expected Quincy Vaughn to be picked. He's got a ton of positional versatility and upside, but there are a lot of great players that are still left on the board. So Calgary must really think that this is going to fit something they want to fix in their roster.
And their fullback retired also. And here's an interesting thing from him at the combine. So for the running backs watching, I get it. You guys get killed in the one-on-one pass rush. It's the linebackers and DNs come at the running backs, and they just got to stand there and take it. He pass protected very well. I thought that was a strength at what he did. And I think that gives somebody who can be a blocker in their system to be able to run the football. And the other thing, can you imagine when you say a running back, you're like, he averaged 1.3 yards rushing in his career? It's a first down, boys. Yeah. When you're a quarterback, when you're a short yardage quarterback, and that he could maybe fill that role in and you can kind of build, and that's the roster flexibility, because he is a little bit, he is a bigger guy, so he may not help as much on special teams from the 40 time, but he could maybe be the emergency quarterback.
He was 11 for 11 in short yardage situations last year at North Dakota. Pretty versatile resume for Quincy Vaughn. When we come back, we have got 2 more picks in this round, the bonus picks for both Winnipeg and Toronto. We'll go to the Bombers next. Let's take a look at what Winnipeg has done so far. Connor Shay, they got him late in the first round, a real bonus for them there. Another linebacker, defensive back type in Jaylen Smith in the second round. Now let's head to the commissioner for their third pick.
With the 18th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers select Taylor Elgersma, quarterback, Wilfrid Laurier. Toronto, you are now on the clock.
Settle down, Marshall. Settle down. Not just a quarterback, but an OUA quarterback. The 2024 Heck Crichton Trophy winner. Led the Golden Hawks to the Vanier Cup game and is going to go to some NFL mini camps first, but we expect him to be available in the CFL this year.
Yeah, I believe stops in Buffalo and Green Bay.
No. Marshall's first. This is quarterback.
We're letting Marshall go
Marshall's first.
My bad.
On the rare opportunity, because we don't get many of these, that a Canadian quarterback gets drafted, let alone in the second round, I'll jump ahead of Dwayne on this one. But it's for me, this is it's a special player, and it's a unique opportunity. Obviously, for him, is his draft process, whether it was going down and being a part of the Senior Bowl, all the rest. Like, he really earned those looks down south, and I love this fit with Winnipeg. I thought it was the best situation for him. It's the Yates Cup this year. I was joking with Laurier head coach Michael Faulds, and working alongside quarterback coach and passing game Todd Galloway there and saying there were a couple of throws he made against Western in the Yates Cup that the professional broadcaster in me had to go, wow, what a throw by Taylor Elgersma. In my mind, I was just going, whoa, how? Because it was layered and it was over the top and he stepped into it. He's got a fighter's mentality. He plays angry to me. He's got crazy arm talent. There's a lot that he has to learn. Oh, hey, Zach Collaros, can I watch you? Like, if you want to come up to Winnipeg and learn how to play the game professionally, there is nobody better in the CFL right now than Zach Collaros.
I would say this, like, you're right. I was watching the McMaster game early in the season, and he made a spectacular throw on the boundary that was a throw behind, which is 40 yards downfield on the sideline. The DB had no chance at it. I said, that is a big-time arm that can make all the throws. Now, the thing I really loved about him is his accuracy. You saw 75% completion, and some of that is BTLs, behind the line of scrimmage screens. If you throw those inaccurately, your receivers cannot continue to run. He did that very well, hitting Ethan Jordan, and I thought they did a really good job offensively, giving him opportunities to put the ball in space to those athletes and let them run. I think he processes information quickly, and I know the coaches that talk to him. He's a football guy, very intelligent. They raved about his meetings with all the coaches in the Canadian Football League. So good opportunity for him. Let's see him compete.
He is the most intense person I think I've been around since a guy that I played with at McMaster, which is Kyle Quinlan. It just the fire that burns inside of Taylor Elgersma, he is most at home inside of the huddle.
You notice how Marsh got away from the topic of the McMaster game?
Very quickly. Very quickly.
Very quickly.
And that, as you look at this board, I'm going to keep talking about Taylor Elgersma because there are a few things that stand out to me that have nothing to do with X's and O's or evaluation of quarterback play, arm strength, blah, blah. Talk to his head coach, Michael Falds. And the thing that stands out to me is Michael described him to me as the best leader I've ever been around.
Whew.
Given that Michael Falds is one of the best leaders I've ever been around, that's saying something. It means something. Next thing, drafted by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, what have we kept saying about Winnipeg? They are going to take the best player, regardless of position, and give him a chance to play that position. Great fit in terms of the pick. And number 3, Jim Barker has talked about this a lot in the lead up to the draft. Taylor Elgersma is a guy who twice was part of the CFL's quarterback internship program. He spent time in a couple of training camps with CFL teams. And there's a feeling that has really helped him in terms of no stage being too big as he leads his team to the Vanier Cup, as he goes down and competes at the College Gridiron Showcase, as he goes down and becomes the first U Sports quarterback ever to be invited to the Senior Bowl and gets an opportunity in that game. Given the success he's had after coming through that program, as a league, I got to say the commitment needs to be to getting the 9 best quarterback prospects in that program every year. And if it means in some cases guys are doing it multiple years, start developing your Canadian quarterbacks because there are lots of reasons why that maybe we'll get into in the later part of this show.
Let's head to Winnipeg right now and check in with Kyle Walters, their general manager, who's standing by with John Liu.
Well, Kyle, let's start with your first-round pick, Connor Shay. How does he fit into the succession plan for Adam Bighill?
Well, our goal coming in to tonight, specifically the first couple rounds, we wanted to get some youth in the linebacker core, period, dot, end. We hadn't drafted a linebacker in a number of years. It just hasn't worked out through the years, so we had targeted. We thought Connor was very high on our list, and when he came to us, it was a no-brainer. He runs around. He's played a ton of special teams. He'll get some defensive reps, and we thought he was the best defensive player of the draft.
And your second-round pick, Jaylen Smith, I guess, fall within that same category as well, being a linebacker.
100%. Yeah, he's a little different. Connor's more of an in-the-box traditional linebacker. Jaylen played an outside linebacker in a 30. He played some DB. He's very, very versatile. In our defense, our coaches like the versatility, like the guys that can do a bunch of different things. And after interviewing, he was one of the most pleasant young men we've ever spoken to, and he's going to fit into this building. Both these guys are, which we put a lot of weight into, and I think both of them are going to contribute early on special teams and on defense.
And looking at your third pick, your bonus pick, Taylor Elgersma, a Canadian quarterback has got to be exciting for your fan base, but also just a part of, if you're talking about getting youth into certain positions. Quarterback would be one of them, I would suppose, too.
Yeah, 100%. Taylor's a good player. You know, whether he's Canadian or American, he's a good quarterback. And with that extra pick at the end of the second round, we knew pretty certain he wasn't going to be there at our next pick. And we like him a lot, and he's going to come in and compete as a quarterback and learn from some veteran guys around here. And we're really looking forward to seeing him.
Thank you for this, Cal. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. One final pick to go in the draft. It belongs to the Argos after the trade with the BC Lions. Here is Commissioner Stu Johnson.
With the 19th pick in the 2025 CFL Draft, the Toronto Argonauts select Paris Shand, defensive lineman, LSU. Calgary, you are now on the clock.
Paris Shand will begin his career with the Buffalo Bills. He signed as an undrafted free agent there. Began his career at Arizona 3 seasons before finishing it the last 2 years as a starter, most recently at LSU.
Yeah, and one of the things that'll stand out, and it's been a little bit of a theme with actually multiple defensive linemen in this draft class, former basketball player, former high-level basketball player, as was Darien Newell, as was Jeremiah Ojo. Paris Shand is a guy who, it's going to be interesting to see. We talked about this a little bit with Isaiah Bagnah and the frame as to exactly where he's going to fit in on the defensive line, what's going to be his natural position, or do you see him as a guy who's going to offer you some versatility to play in multiple spots? For a lot of people, it's more the frame of a defensive end. I think for some, maybe more Lapo of a 3 technique.
Yeah, he's very impressive in a number of ways. So sometimes defensive linemen get what's called one-on-ones against a guard, where they just have to block that guy and it's one-on-one. Every time I saw clips of that, he beat the guard easily, got to the quarterback. Where he struggled a little bit is in the run game. Now, he is playing Alabama. He's playing against Arkansas, SEC teams. So he did get blocked a lot in the run game. That's where he's got to improve. But I think a defense can go, hey, let's put 5 guys at the line of scrimmage, put him in a situation where he can't get double teamed, and give him an opportunity to rush the passer. That's what a strength of his. Does he lose a little bit of weight and go outside? I mean, at 270, he runs a 4.72. That's crazy numbers for a guy at 270. But he was interesting on tape. He's just got to get better at stopping the run. So it's either gain a lot of weight, the Dwayne Ford school of gaining weight, right?
Bring a bag of meat.
Yes, bring meat on the road with me, or maybe lose a little weight, plays defensive end. But, you know, this is a really good football player. Maybe him signing with the Bills kind of pushed him down a little bit. I'm not sure. But, you know, I think this is a good pick for Toronto.
But again, Jake Ceresna going to Edmonton, Jared Brinkman, Robbie Smith as well in free agency, right? Like, so it's not that they have to replenish completely just throughout the draft, because you want to be able to do it a variety of different ways. But to add somebody with 34-inch arms that runs that fast and is that big, you can't really go wrong, especially the fact they doubled down defensive line here with Jeremiah Ojo in the first round as well.
All right, let's take a look at the second round before we take a quick break. We'll start with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who took Isaiah Bagnah, the defensive lineman. They went defensive line with the top 3 picks of this round, Darien Newell and Hayden Harris. Then a couple of O-linemen, Sam Carson and Erik Anderson, followed by the much anticipated kind of run on DBs, Nate Boschman, Jaylen Smith, who's a bit of a hybrid guy. Jackson Finley goes to the hometown Lions. Quincy Vaughn taken a little higher than we thought at the tight end 8 spot. Taylor Elgersma, this is the Marshall Ferguson Award right here. Pick a quarterback getting taken by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the second round. We'll be talking a lot more about him. And then Paris Shand, after a trade between BC and Toronto, wraps up the round. That is it for us on the TSN side, but we're going to continue with all the picks for the remainder of the draft, rounds 3 through 8, coming up on tsn.ca.
watch his film. It was exquisite. When he's in rhythm, man, he is in rhythm.
Rourke winds up down the field. And it's caught inside the 10. What a throw. Kurt the Kid.
Curtis Rourke has had the touch.
King Curtis to you, okay?
Welcome back to TSN's continuing coverage of the 2025 CFL Draft. We made a little room for the guy on the left, Jim Barker. He wanted a chair. We got him a chair, along with Paul Lapolis, Marshall Ferguson, and Dwayne Ford. Rounds 3 through 8 we will bring to you. And look, I was giving Coach Barker a little grief earlier because he didn't have the lineman in the first round, but his top 25 picks all got taken in the top 3, right?
Yes.
There you go, and let's get to round 3, which is littered by a bunch of UBC players. Anton Hay goes 20th to Calgary, but then we've got Thunderbirds with 3 of the next 4 picks. Offensive lineman Arvin Hosseini. We have got Skylar Griffith. We've got Isaiah Knight going to Edmonton with the 24th pick. And then Curtis Rourke, you might have heard of his brother. You might have heard of Curtis already. Got drafted in the 7th round by the San Francisco 49ers. We saw Taylor Elgersma go late in the 2nd round. I think a lot of people believe that Taylor is going to be available this year, despite a couple of minicamp invites. I'm not sure we're going to see Curtis Rourke in the Canadian Football League for quite some time. But if you're Saskatchewan, you're not willing to take that chance. You want to make sure that he is yours if and when he comes.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this in terms of a strategy for Saskatchewan, that they have been somewhat aggressive in the draft in the last 2 years. Clearly part of their philosophy, trying to get the best players. Sometimes that may mean being patient, waiting for them to get there. That's obviously going to be the case, Marsh, with Curtis Rourke.
Yeah, Tavius Robinson, City Sow, and Kyle Hergel. And now we add to that list Curtis Rourke and see whether or not he makes the journey into Riderville. I love it. Again, it's not one of those where, hey, Winnipeg got a quarterback, let's go get one as well. I think it's just a good situation for him to, when he does come to the Canadian Football League, have an opportunity to play, because Trevor Harris is not going to be again around forever, and there isn't really a true succession plan there. Obviously, Jake Mayer just comes over. Will he still be there by the time that we see Curtis Rourke, if and when Curtis Rourke comes up in the next couple of years? Crazier things have happened, right? So I think it's a good spot for him to be in, and the thing I'm happiest about, it's in the West Division, because that means we have the potential of Rourke versus Rourke at some point in the next couple of years, several times over due to the regular season.
Curtis Rourke had a spectacular senior season. I love that he goes to Ohio, very successful at Ohio. Then he goes up, plays spectacular on the national stage. Everybody knows who he is. He plays in the big games. You know, he struggled in some of the big games. I'm going to say the O-line struggled. It didn't help him out very much. But this is a guy with a strong arm, very accurate thrower, high TDs, low interceptions. This is a guy who's going to fit in to an NFL. The team that likes him in the NFL, they're going to be like, this guy can throw. He's smart, intelligent, big body. And I'll tell you what, with the ACL surgery, he still runs, Jim. Like, you could tell there was something going on because he still ran in Ohio. He was able to move and get out of the pocket for a big guy.
Well, he's got great mobility back there, and he eludes tackles. I'm shocked he's drafted this early because he was picked 7th round, but I had him going maybe as early as the 4th or 5th round in the NFL. This guy is really a player, and you couldn't pick a better place for him to go. He's going to walk in, and 2 years ago, that same team is paying the guy $50 million that they drafted in the 7th round. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to look at him as a 7th round draft pick. They're going to look at him as, this is our next $50 million guy. Mm-hmm. I just think the guy is very talented. He has very limited wasted movement. He's very accurate. I mean, you look for guys that win. The guy was MVP in the MAC. He goes to Indiana with a brand new coaching staff, playing in the Big Ten, and wins, and they make I mean, what else can a guy do?
Well, that's the point. What he couldn't do was get evaluated in the offseason. And Jim, you know as well as anyone that when you get into that time of year, from the time the season ends to the time the draft happens, the pro days, the combines, all of it, it matters. We saw what Taylor Elgersma was able to do just by going to the Senior Bowl and being able to throw at a couple of events. You talked about a 4th or a 5th round grade on Curtis Rourke. I agree with you, but he needed that offseason process. To not have that, I think, really hurt him. When I look at some of the names that got taken in the NFL draft ahead of Curtis Rourke, I just shook my head and wondered what would have happened if he had that whole process. So look, again, the odds of a 7th-round pick making it and becoming a $50 million starter in the NFL are low, but the guy in front of him, Brock Purdy, did. Brock Purdy's now had some injuries, so we bring all of that up because will we see him back? You know, I know me personally, I got bullish on Nathan when he got the opportunity, you know, and it didn't work out for him because that league can spit people up or chew people up and spit them out. So, you know, I hope Curtis gets that opportunity. I agree with you. I think San Francisco is a great spot, but what's it going to take for him to get that, Jim?
Well, I mean, it's going to take, you got to get breaks to make it in the NFL, especially when you're coming in as a 7th-round draft pick. But this guy's got everything it takes, and he's been in tough situations. Like I say, I would love to see him in the Canadian Football League, but I would love him more to go down there and have an incredible amount of success in the NFL and become an all-pro player. Seriously, I think he has the ability to be, he's more suited for the Canadian game, actually, than his brother was. I mean, Nathan's a great quarterback, but in terms of being suited for the game, because of his 6'5", strong arm, the smaller holes, he's just more made for the NFL game, I believe. And I think, like I say, I just feel great about his chances in that league.
He's such an overachiever. You think about it, you hear some of the coaches talk about, like at Ohio, well, we didn't know what we had in him. We took him almost because his brother was there. What's he do? Becomes the MVP, like Jim said. Then he goes up to the highest level. Indiana plays it spectacular. So this is a guy who has overachieved every opportunity he's had. Maybe he can do it the next level.
4th round has already begun. We'll get to that in a moment. But, you know, the fact that we're able to have this conversation about quarterbacks, and we've still got Arnaud Desjardins from Laval that's available. We've still got Jonathan Senecal who's available, Garrett Rooker from UBC. There may be some other guys that potentially are in this conversation before the show ends. So I'll ask both of you, just because you're in the roster building business at various times in your careers, do teams now look at it more seriously, the opportunity to affect your ratio by starting a Canadian quarterback like Edmonton and BC are going to?
Well, it's hard to do that because it's still not counted as a position. I mean, if he's playing, yes, but you have to have an American behind him. As soon as they, you know, when they change that quarterback rule, it'll help Canadian quarterbacks. But I think, for example, a team like the BC Lions, for the Edmonton Elks, who are playing with Trey Ford, to be able to have a Canadian behind him, if he can compete and they can win games with him, now you don't have to change your ratio if your starter gets hurt. So having 2 starters in the league helps those quarterbacks, and that's why we're having this discussion now about some of the great young quarterbacks that are in U Sports and you know, just Canadian trained, like your son.
Oh, here it goes.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's the best thing the league did. A couple years ago, they said, hey, we're going to start rewarding teams for playing Canadian quarterbacks. And that gave you an opportunity to go, hey, listen, we got to give more guys opportunities. And these guys merited these opportunities to play. And what I like about this is it is very hard. There's not a lot of pro football players playing quarterback making money, guys. It's a small group. Call it 50 people. But we've got some guys playing at smaller college football programs. That's what I kind of like, you know, with Trey Ford, Taylor Elgersma, because normally the quarterbacks come from the 300 scholarship schools in the United States, but we've got some guys from U Sports schools. I think that's pretty cool.
Dwayne, who's next in the pipeline?
Well, I think the guy that most people look at as next in the pipeline is Christian Veilleux, who has been at Pittsburgh, has been at Penn State. He's now at Georgia State and should be in next year's draft class. One name, obviously, we're kind of excited about, Blake Hebert, who is Notre Dame's #1 quarterback commit, is a kid from Maple Ridge, BC. That's where he was born, spent the first number of years of his life before moving to the Boston area to finish his high school career. So CFL scouts, no doubt, will be watching. But, you know, to me, you talk big picture, Jim. You've been in the personnel business for a long time. Lapo, obviously, coaching. And one of the big things we've heard since NIL money has become such a big thing, in CFL circles, we talk about how difficult it may become to get quarterbacks to come up here because they're making so much money in college, quite frankly. And so to me, automatically, okay, well, then where are we going to get quarterbacks? Well, let's start investing more in developing our Canadian quarterbacks. And I'm a believer that timing is everything. When you look historically at the Canadian quarterback question, that sometimes, you know, Jesse Palmer came up. He was the only guy. You weren't going to make a rule. When Kyle Quinlan was coming out, Kyle could have played in this league. He was sort of the only guy at that time. Well, now for the first time in CFL history, you've got 2 Canadian quarterbacks who are slated to start as we go into the season. You've got 2 Canadian quarterbacks right now going to NFL camps in Curtis Rourke and Taylor Elgersma. Don't forget, there were 2 quarterbacks that kicked around the NFL all of last year in Brett Rippon and Casey Bauman, who will qualify as nationals in the CFL. And you've got a draft class at this time with a number of top youth sports quarterbacks. In terms of timing, to try and push things forward as far as the development and a place on the roster for Canadian quarterbacks, the timing just makes sense to me right now. Take advantage of the window that we're in right now because the position has never been deeper.
Well, give the CFL credit because I'm a big believer. Taylor Elgersma, one reason, he went 3 years to camps. And when you're sitting in the room with Bo Levi Mitchell, with McLeod Bethel Thompson, with some of these guys, and you're learning from Mike Miller, from Scott Milanovich, from some of the great coaches up here, I honestly believe that had a big factor in him playing the way he did at Laurier, getting his Senior Bowl thing. It crushed me when he didn't go to the Combine because I felt that the CFL deserved to have that. I deserved to have a great player like Taylor at that Combine, even if he doesn't run or whatever. So I thought that was a little bit of a misstep, but I give the CFL a lot of credit for going out years ago and doing that, and I think it's starting to pay dividends.
But you know, the one thing the CFL, in my opinion, and I've felt this for years, needs to do better with the program is don't just let the teams decide who they're going to bring into the internship program, because I'll be very blunt. There are times where teams are just going to pick the local guy because it doesn't cost anything to bring him in, and it's a token thing that, yeah, this program exists, we'll participate. That's wrong. We need to actually make an effort to develop Canadian quarterbacks, and I talked about some of the reasons why. So what should happen, in my opinion, every year, evaluate across this country, whether they're in high school, whether they are in university, whether they're playing junior football, identify who are the 9 best Canadian quarterback prospects and make sure year after year, those 9 guys are the 9 guys who are in camps. And it may change, right? Your rankings of who the top 9 guys are may change from year to year. But if you have an absolutely fantastic prospect, best prospect we've ever had, and he's in high school, get him in a CFL camp 4 years in a row when he's going to a youth sports school and is able to do that and take full advantage. As you said, Taylor Elgersma did this 3 times and look at the heights he reached.
And I would say, too, that that's going to be something, if it was happening year over year, that would drive competition from coast to coast. Because quarterbacks are competitive by nature. And so as soon as you start saying, hey, did you know there's this watch list and only the top 9 guys get to go into these camps? And now I understand the Montreal Alouettes, they bring in a lot of the RSEQ quarterbacks and because they're trying to develop football in the entire province. But I think that would really drive the entire level forward because it would create that coast-to-coast awareness of, hey, like when I was playing at McMaster, it was, hey, Jordan Heather's out at Bishops. I don't know anything about this guy. Well, he wins the Heck Crichton. He's an amazing player, but I didn't know anything about him because there was a whole lot of, well, I don't have their game film, so therefore I'm not really on the same page with them. I would say, too, it's worth celebrating the fact that we've had 2 quarterbacks drafted in the last 5 years, right, being Rourke and Ford, 2 tonight. And this is to a larger point that I wanted to make here this evening while we're talking Canadian quarterbacks, which is, maybe too philosophical around this topic, but a lot of people, I think, believe that Canadian quarterbacks just are what they are. This is the way it's been. This is the way it's always going to be. That's not true. It's evolving. It's different. There are different people coaching. It's going to continue to rise year over year over year. So anytime that I hear people say, well, we won't see this, and this is just a really good draft class, or, this is an anomaly, it's like, no, when you start talking about the pipeline, it used to be, well, there's this guy that's maybe 3 years out, and we might see him, and he's good, but now every year it's, well, there's this kid here and that kid there, and then there's 2 of them in youth sports, and so I think this is something people across the country need to open their mind to, which is don't just be stuck in the idea of, well, this is what the conversation's always been and it's always going to be this way. Start to think of it as maybe this is a growth opportunity. Maybe this is something that's changing year over year, because I really believe the history of Canadian quarterbacking is in its infancy at this point. We have not even started to tell the story of what this is going to look like in 10, 20, 50 years.
And I'll make 2 points. Like the first point I would say is we have to give credit to the players that are playing right now because they're really good quarterbacks. And we can't, I don't think sometimes coaches will say, Jim and I talk about this all the time, we're not playing Canadian, we're not playing that guy because he's a Canadian quarterback. The talent these guys have competes with anybody in the country, and they should be thanked about. And I think the thing you hit on is the name, image, likeness that is down in the United States right now for college football players. Backup quarterbacks in major college programs are making over $100,000. I read an article that the top 25 quarterbacks in 2 years will make more than half of the NFL players at quarterback position. So it is going to be hard to say, hey, Jim's a GM telling you, hey, I got 65 Canadian for you to come up, and the guy was making $2 million a year. So it is going to be harder to get quarterbacks to come up to this league.
See, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because when their eligibility's up, NIL's done. And I mean, they're going to stay there an extra year. They're going to stay there an extra year. I mean, look at Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers lost a lot of money. He lost a lot of money going into the draft and not getting drafted till the 7th round. And when he could have easily made $2 or $3 million, $4 million maybe somewhere, he opted to go into the NFL draft. That's where you're going to see it is there. For us, they're going to play out their time, and when they're done playing, if they want to keep playing, then they're gonna look up here at Canada.
And you're not going to get the hard part is you're not going to find the Bo Levi Mitchells, the Vernon Adams. It's going to be hard to say, hey, this is a 1AA quarterback or a small college quarterback, because all those good players as young players, they're going up to make money. So it's going to be hard. Those guys are all going to be Division I players or FBS players.
Great conversation, long overdue, and hopefully it's something people can take a look at as we continue to evaluate the position. Let's take a look at some of these players in the 4th round. Silas Hubert, brother of Owen Hubert, goes 31 overall to Edmonton.
It's a steal.
Sorry?
That's a steal.
There you go. Seth Hundeby, linebacker who everybody understands is going back to school. Very athletic player, very successful in U Sports. Saskatchewan guy, probably goes higher in this draft if he was going to be available this year.
I had him as the 5th linebacker overall in the draft, Seth Hundeby.
Yeah.
And the only reason he's not going is because he's going back he's an engineer.
Absolutely. And then also Keanu Yazbek. That fullback position, I think, is becoming more and more valued if you can be versatile. Now, that particular player, he's a guy that ran really hard. He played at Western, can potentially transition. How do you see him? I mean, you've watched him as closely as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, a very good running back, obviously. Special teams body type. I know the one concern that some people had with Keanu is he has had a bit of a history of shoulder injuries. And I know that at times that has limited some of the things that he's able to do on special teams, but if he's able to overcome that, certainly in terms of what his athletic ability is, what his frame is, this is a guy who can give you some snaps as a backup running back and hopefully contribute for you on special teams.
Yeah, I love him. I think his game is great. I also think Seth Hundeby going to Saskatchewan is fantastic. But
that's that patience.
Yeah,
in Saskatchewan, they will wait for a good player.
They will sit and let him develop and continue to go through his engineering degree and all the rest. But Yazbek to me was actually, I think, the most impressive. And I shouldn't really call it a surprise because I've, being around and seeing Western play, he runs very, very hard. But it was more so when he got to the combine and he tested so well-rounded. And then you start to see the frame and you piece together all the parts. I thought he was a really, really impressive player. So I'm excited about that. But again, as we're talking about a back, it's
he
like,
needs to improve his pass protection to play in the CFL.
Yes,
because there's no coaches in this league going to play him unless he gets that pass protection better.
Two players I want to talk to you about in round 3, and hopefully we can get some highlights of them as well. But at the running back position, Skylar Griffith, 3rd round, 22nd overall. You'll love him because he's going to be a fullback. And Isaiah Knight, both players from UBC, both players going to Edmonton 2 picks apart at 22 and 24. So I look at Isaiah Knight, incredibly productive player at UBC, over 3,600 yards. The guy was just awesome for that team. He was the backbone of that team for the last couple of seasons. Didn't test as well. But when you look at him play, I mean, all he does is produce. And then Skylar Griffith, injured during the season, but when we talk about again the fullback type, we saw Quincy Vaughn, but in terms of a natural, David Mackey type of player, I think Griffiths could be that guy when he's healthy. But let's start with Knight. Can he be a running back in this league?
I think he can contribute as a running back. I don't think he's going to be a starting running back in the Canadian Football League. I think his role is going to be a little different. But I do believe Isaiah Knight is a bigger back as well, right? Weighed in at about 215. I know people maybe looked at him a little bit differently, where some thought he might be a feature back, ran a 4.8, which I think kind of put a bit of an end to that kind of thinking. But as you said, a very productive guy and a guy who I think can contribute in other ways, whether it's as a fullback, whether it's on special teams, giving you a certain number of snaps per game. I'll just throw in before I pass it on, Skylar Griffith, I think, is an underrated player in this draft, and we're starting to see a number of guys in round 3 and 4 in Skylar Griffith, Gavin Cokes, the center from UBC, Nicky Farinaccio, linebacker from Montreal, Dadzi, the defensive back from Windsor, Estevan Gadzi. These are all guys who would have been at the CFL Combine, but were all dealing with different injuries. And so they didn't get talked about a lot by a lot of people in the draft process because of those injuries, but the teams are very aware of them. Estevan Asibo Dadzi, a high character player, very productive at the University of Windsor, part of their resurgence in their secondary. So, I mean, you're starting to see some of these names come off the list that aren't all the names that people are seeing on the websites from the Combine.
I think it's funny sometimes as coaches, we forget how slow some of our players are. Like Isaiah Knight didn't have a great 40 time, but you watch him on tape, he runs patiently. Like, and if you're in a zone scheme, you have to be patient and understand, set your blocks up, let the linemen move people, and then cut behind. He does that very well. And the thing I loved he did is when he got his shoulders square, went north-south, he ran people over. And he was really good on tape. I like him. But sometimes like, oh, he didn't run a real fast 40. I'm telling you, at the end of Andrew Harris's career, he didn't run a real fast 40, but I didn't care. He was a great running back, right? So sometimes we get in the height, weight, speed too much sometimes at certain positions.
Skylar Griffith he reminded me a little bit of Nikola Kalinic, who's now with the Atlanta Falcons. He's a great special teams player, and I think that got overlooked a little bit in terms of him. You have to watch a special teams film of him to truly appreciate his value. So I was actually thinking he might go a little sooner than he did.
He's coming off an ACL,
and
so he's not going to be ready for camp. And I think that's the reason.
And there's a couple guys like that. Jaylen Ram, who Thomas Ram's son from Middle Tennessee State, in 22, watching his 22 film, I had him as good as any linebacker in the draft. But then 23, he gets an ACL, transfers to UTEP, gets hurt at UTEP, doesn't play for 2 years. So he's a risk. Has not been taken yet, but Jaylen Ram is a player if he ever gets healthy. That's the big question.
Let's talk about receivers. We're now into the 5th round. We have seen very few receivers selected in this draft. We talked about Keelin White and Damien Alford at the 2 of the top 3 for the first time since 1991. You see Joey Corcoran there, and there was a big drop-off after those first 2, Lapo.
Yeah, Joey Corcoran from the University of New Hampshire, I thought he was very good on tape as a route runner. I thought he set people up. You watch him in his one-on-ones in the Combine. He understands how to, I'm running a curl route, I got to turn to defender's hips and come back. He got separation better than I think most of the guys at the Combine and got open. So he had a very productive career at University of New Hampshire. And I don't know if he's not the big interior body some teams are going to use for a blocker. He'll probably play on the outside, but this is a talented football player, well coached at New Hampshire by Ricky Santos, former CFL quarterback. So I like that pick.
I love that guy on film.
Yeah, he's a good player.
He had a 27.5-inch vertical jump, and he ran 4.76, which in the CFL it can be difficult. But again, I love that guy on film. I think he's just a great football player. And Janusis is just so young. He's learning how to be a player, and he's explosive speed. He's a good returner, but he's learning how to be a receiver. He's from Guelph, and again, talent, but you got to develop it. And will he get a chance in the CFL? I didn't even see who took him.
Is it the next the Guelph sleeper receiver pick of 2025? Because we've gone through enough of those over the last 5 years.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to throw one out there as far as the Guelph receiver sleeper pick. And there's some kids. This is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but everybody forgets about the kids that go to university and then maybe don't stay in university football for whatever reason. School may not be their thing, and they go and play junior football, but their names remain on the draft list because they started their careers in university. There are a couple of fantastic kids, across the country, and this is every year, but there are a couple of fantastic kids on that St. Clair Saints team that won the national championship. One of them, Cameron St. Kitts Park, was a receiver, started his career, played at 2003, who played as an 18-year-old as a receiver at Guelph, and I think would have been the next guy from that Guelph train. Anthony Adams, a defensive end, who played as an 18-year-old, an 03, on that Western Vanier Cup team in 2021, also part of that St. Clair Saints team. And I hate that sometimes these guys get overlooked. I hope CFL teams are taking their time to look at where these guys have gone after their youth sports careers, because there are some good players playing junior. I know there are a couple others, having done the Canada Football Chat Prospects game, guys who are among the top high school players in the country that have gone on. You know, remember, we're in a time right now where a lot of these kids started university during COVID, right? And so that made the school part of it, I think, a lot tougher for some kids to assimilate in their first couple of years. That can contribute to why some guys may have moved on to different things. And so I know there are other kids, Cody McMahon, who was at University of Calgary, I think it was with West Shore Rebels. Tyson Kruszalniski went to University of Alberta, ended up with, I believe, Edmonton Wildcats, these guys playing junior. These are all guys that we had, along with Anthony Adams, in our first Canada Football Chat top prospects game in 2019. These kids are still playing football just because they're not on university rosters and are worth the look.
Ethan Jordan, meanwhile, a player we expected to get taken by now, maybe a little higher in the receiving crew, is still available. Eric Cumberbatch, you know, this was supposed to be a high-end defensive back class. I know for me, I had him as my third DB behind Finley and Boschman, and he's available here in the 5th round, so a pretty good value pick for Ottawa there.
Ethan Bybert is another one who from South Dakota who hasn't been taken yet.
Winnipeg.
Oh, they did take him.
Yeah, Winnipeg, good pick for Winnipeg.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
27th, I believe, at the end of the 3rd there.
Let's talk a bit more about Cumberbatch.
Really, you know, I thought he did a great job. Like, he can run, cover guys very well. I thought he caught the ball well at the combine, as good as any of the defensive backs there. Productive, got some length to him. This is you know, he was pretty impressive. I thought, yeah, he could catch the ball better than any of the other defensive backs, watching them in the combine. And this gives you a guy who can run, put him at free safety, see what he can do, get him closer in a position to, hey, I want you to see where the ball is, go make a play, catch it in the air.
I'd love to see him at field corner at some point, like even in a depth role, just because
that's where he needs to be.
He's so rangy that it's like if he wants to fall off onto any vertical route from like the slot receivers to the field side, man, he could cover so much ground. And I my favorite story from him at the combine, I wasn't there for it, but I had somebody tell me that he got up to the broad jump and he was set at 10 feet. And he said, move it to 11. And they're like, what? Yeah. He's like, no, move it to 11. It's fine. I've done my testing. I'm going to jump 11. They're like, okay, fine. They set it to 11. Then he out-jumped it. He jumped past the 11. And everybody was like, oh, okay, he wasn't lying.
The interesting thing watching him at combine, like, he kept pressing up when he played corner. Yeah. And I'm like, back up. He kept running by. And then when he backed up, he could use his speed, recognize, and make plays on the ball. So, yeah, I think
over 6'2", 39-inch vertical jump, which is the number one thing that you look at when you look at DBs. You know, he's not a trained killer as a tackler. I mean, he's not that guy, but he brings him to the ground. I think with his size, he's got value on special teams, which DBs a lot of time, backup DBs don't, because they're just too small. Special teams coaches say, I need big. Well, here you got a big guy, and he'll get him down. He's, like I say, he's not a trained killer, but he will get him down. He's a sure tackler.
The thing that I love about this too, and it's something we don't talk about all that much, is I don't think you're going to lose him in the free agency process. He's from Alexandria, Ontario, which is not that far away from Montreal. Geographically, the Alouettes are probably closer. But Ottawa is very close, and he obviously played for the GGs. It's like you get a little bit of home cooking, you get a chance to train, put some weight on, you get a chance to develop, play in front of people that you love, that you know your friends are coming to the game still. Like, that stuff is really important when you're young in your career and you want to find a place that you love playing football. And I think Ottawa is going to get so much production out of him when the time is right, because I think he does have a ton of ability that we haven't seen yet. And this is the right spot.
Another pick I wanted to talk about from that round, one pick earlier, it was Dre Doiron, the offensive lineman from Kansas, going to the BC Lions. Now, he was a starter at Buffalo, transferred to Kansas, didn't necessarily get as much playing time, and then declared 1 year early for the draft. Is there upside here for a player that still managed to have some success at Buffalo before making that move?
Yeah, to me, Doiron is an interesting guy because, yeah, you often think, like, here's a guy who spent 5 years in NCAA Division I football, first couple of years at Buffalo, and as you said, he redshirted a year, then he's a starter, starts every game the next year, transfers, follows Coach Lance Leipold to Kansas, never starts again in 3 years at Kansas. I see potential in this player, certainly, because I like the way he moved as a big guy. I sort of liked his feet, liked the way he moved, that I think there's something there, but something's missing as a player, right? Like you sort of expect, we talked about Christopher Fortin maybe as a guy after 5 years in a D1 program that is a little closer to his ceiling, a little more ready to play. Dorian's had the same 5 years, probably at a higher level program, but doesn't necessarily look like a guy who's that close to playing.
Well, his spot in this league is probably going to be at center, and that's what he did at the Combine. He was mostly a center, and he's going to struggle a bit with that. And is a team going to have patience? You know, another center that hasn't been taken yet is Ethan Pyle from Guelph, who
technician.
is just a great player. But he's undersized. But so was Sean McEwen. He was undersized. This guy is just, you know, he's 284 pounds, but I thought he was one of the technique-wise, 100%. One of the best players in the entire draft. But again, you get a little undersized and you worry about, you know, some of the defensive tackles you have to block in this league, or they put a big nose guard on him, and you know he's going to be on his back.
It feels like
he just physically can't handle it.
Pyle probably got bumped right because Gavin Cokes goes, right? And so you end up having that shift, and you're still sitting there, and Alex Berwick from Western is out there as a true natural center as well. But that one to me is, for Doiron, it's like, man, less than 50 snaps played in 3 years. And now you're going to jump into a camp and try and prove yourself declaring early. That's a tall hill to climb.
But the one thing you have to remember is Lance Leipold, who is a great coach,
was his coach,
talked him into going with him. So he's got some qualities.
He's had a lot of practice reps.
He's athletic. It starts with, does he have the athleticism to be able to hold up and be able to get his feet in front of people and stay in front of people? I think he did that very well, watching him at Combine. And the interesting thing, I actually went back and looked at Kansas in the draft, and they had 2 guys taken in the NFL draft. And some of the things, he got caught behind some pretty good players and didn't get the opportunity. So the guy did start at Buffalo for, I know it was a couple of years ago, but he's got tools. It's a good pick late round. Just develop him, see if he can play.
Yeah, here's a look at the rest of the round. We've got Liam Hoskins going to Saskatchewan at 43. Gabriel Messanouv is going to Montreal, defensive lineman. Then Lane Novak and Jalen Ram as well round out the 5th round. So this used to be a draft that was a 6-round draft. And then the teams would have 2 additional protected picks for 7 and 8. And then eventually they said, look, why don't you just let us draft them and go to 8 rounds? And it's easy to assume that this is going to be, these last 3 rounds are afterthoughts, but far from it. I mean, we talked about it with Dave Naylor earlier, that just the number of players that have had success from later rounds, even somebody like last year with Adjo from the 7th round getting selected and having a pretty good career. The guys that are at this stage of the draft, they love it. Like, they love football, and they want to play as long as humanly possible and will scratch to get whatever opportunity they have.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there are a number of terrific players still out there. I mean, one of them that stands out to me, and we've mentioned his name already, I didn't see Ethan Jordan's name come up on the board yet. I think for a lot of people, Ethan Jordan was probably the number 3 receiver in this draft class. This is a kid who's led the country in receiving the last 2 years, a guy on the receiving end of a number of Taylor Elgersma's passes over that time. I think a very good player, not the biggest receiver, and I don't know if that scares people off because of special teams, but I think he's a guy, first of all, who can play receiver in this league. But the other piece of it is, again, one of those things that drives me absolutely nuts is when people automatically decide, because a guy hasn't played special teams, oh, he can't play special teams. Yeah, I'm going to give him a chance to prove to me that he can.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I see this all the time in this league with people at different positions where decisions are made about players, about things they can't do without giving them a chance to prove that they can't do them. And it drives me nuts. Like, you put a kid up in the combine, give him a few reps in special teams without really coaching him of what you want him to do. Well, yeah, they're probably going to struggle. But you get them with a team and actually coach them and teach them what you want them to do on special teams. Coachable, competitive kids are probably going to do it. I played with David Sapungis in university, going back obviously a number of years, but Sponge was multi-time most outstanding Canadian as a receiver in the CFL. He was a star receiver with us at Western. Dave Sapungis comes into the CFL, and he would have been one of those guys that a lot of people in this day and age of the CFL would, oh, you can't play special teams. Sponge led the CFL in special teams tackles before he became a starting receiver. A lot of people don't realize that. Give these guys an opportunity to prove they can't do it before you decide they can't do it.
And I like your point, Farhan, about the draft used to be 6 rounds. And I think the league did a good job listening to GMs and coaches. because the last 2 picks you were able to add 2 players, but it was based on waiver wire. What that meant is the team worst place, they got to pick their 2, and then second place. They said, wait, not put them in the draft. There's still enough players for us to take. Let us start trying to find those last couple guys and let us draft them instead of being a waiver wire priority. And I think that's been great. We need more guys to get opportunities to go to training camp and be non-counters.
Ludovic Choquette, the running back from Long Island. You're a big fan of his, Jim?
Daniel Adeboboye. That's who he is. He is a clone of Daniel Adeboboye. I love this guy. I didn't even know Long Island played Tennessee and these big schools. I'm watching him on film, and like I say, Daniel came out of Bryant. This guy is the same kind of guy. He's always falling forward. He's tough and physical. I had him as my top running back in the entire thing. And I just think he's a outstanding player. And I know it's Western and but another great player that hasn't been picked that had a phenomenal combine is Max von Mühldorfer.
Yeah.
I mean, his numbers, 6 foot 290 and he ran 4.97 with a 34-inch vertical jump. That's freakish.
The kid had a faster shuttle time, short shuttle, than any defensive lineman at the NFL combine.
Yeah. Amazing. I saw his 3 cones.
I'm shocked that he's still available. He's a little fire plug. Their teams even talked about maybe he can play fullback or something. But when you can run like that, to be able to get an interior defensive lineman that's going to back up, he's going to be a backup in the interior defensive line, but who can also play special teams, that's rare. And when you run 4.9, you can play special teams.
The player currently in the Canadian Football League who has the most games played from his draft year that is still active is in Winnipeg.
Jake Thomas.
His name is Jake Thomas.
I drafted him in 2011.
And
he also drafted Jade Etienne, so quit patting him.
Andy Duck.
But the reason I bring that up is just like we were talking earlier tonight about Cleon Lang, and it's like, well, maybe defensive line is somewhere that they might want to go. It's like, I understand that there's Daniel Poco and Kenny Onyeka and some different names in Ottawa, but for me, you look at what's going on in Winnipeg, and it's like, if you just want to bring in somebody that your fan base is going to absolutely fall in love with, that has a skill set that would not be exactly the same but could line up behind Jake and understand what Jake is doing successfully and then apply all of that raw, natural talent and athleticism that Max von Mühldorfer has, I'm like, Winnipeg, let's do this thing. I don't know if they're waiting on it and trying to get good value, but
he's tough to move off the spot. And when he wants to throw somebody, he threw him out of the way and made the tackle. He's got some tools. He can move laterally and throw people out of the way.
I wanted to bring up the conversation of value found in these late rounds because sometimes, we didn't get into this earlier, teams miss big in the first round. We've talked about what happens at number 1 overall, which can be a disaster. And, we've seen that from, picks like Faith Akakati and, there's a long list. Jake Burt, there's a number of these guys. What do you attribute the miss rate, Jim, to some of the top guys that just don't work out, whereas sometimes you can just find gold in late rounds?
Well, again, I think when you're going when you have the first pick in the draft, one of the big advantages is you can sign them early. Now, it's gotten tougher to do that because the NFL is bringing so many people in. But, it's just like Faith Akakati. I had traded that pick the year before to them because it was just one of those years that, kind of like this year, you could put everybody in, put all the receivers in, and different people are going to say this guy should be number 1, and that's the way it goes some years. This year's that way.
Did you trade that pick for Drew Willie?
Yes, I did.
Year? Yeah,
I did. That one got me fired.
I was thinking it. I wasn't going to say it.
Everybody forgets that the guy I traded for the first pick overall in the draft, but that guy never played it down. Yeah. Still got fired.
You knew what you were doing all along.
And I do see this a little bit where it's a good thing that they've expanded what qualifies as a Canadian. The league needs that. But at the same time, sometimes you will get players that really don't have an affinity for the CFL or an understanding of it. And then when they get to a certain point, the hunger to play in the league might not be there compared to some of the guys that get taken in the later round. I'm not saying that the guys that are getting picked later are better players. I'm not suggesting that at all. However, their desire to want to have an extended career in this league might be a little greater than a guy that, like you'll get a hit like Alex Singleton, which is great, but you might get that same player that just isn't as invested at a certain point in time. Is that fair?
Was that Mark Chapman? Is that the name? Like
First
Hamilton,
overall
first
pick in
overall pick, and he
2018.
says, I'm not coming up to play the league. Yeah. And what's interesting, like when I went to Winnipeg in 02 and 03, we never had first-round picks. Like the 2 years I was there, we didn't ever pick. Why? Because Brendan Taman and Dave Ritchie always traded away their picks. Now, you ask Brendan Taman? Well, I got Doug Brown with one of my first-round picks, and he was an established player that I already knew about. I wanted to get a known commodity compared to an unknown commodity. The other year, he traded to get Kevin Glenn, gave up a first-round pick. So he's like, I'm going to go get some value because sometimes it is, as you guys say, a crapshoot on whether these guys can pan out. I'm taking known commodities.
Well, you never know guys till you coach them. Like Jake Bird. I mean, he fit all the things that they were looking for, but then, he comes, he gets hurt, and it's just a lot of these guys that wash out are coming from the States, so they haven't coached them. They're taking they're listening to the coaches that had them, but you don't know a guy till you coach him. I mean, it truly is a crapshoot. But it's the same thing in the NFL. I mean, there's plenty of NFL first-round picks that are never going to play. They're just not. And everything's rosy right now. I mean, the best job in the world is to be a first-round pick in the NFL between now and training camp. Once they start playing games and get training camp, a little different.
Yeah, I think so often people forget that football, maybe more than any other sport, success is system-driven, like that it is fit-driven, being in the right place at the right time with a system that values your particular skills, or a coach, general manager, scout, position coach, whatever it is, who values the things you do well and maybe isn't as bothered by the things that you don't do that well. And so sometimes you'll have a guy who has a perfect fit in college and you think, oh, he's a great player. And then you get him in the Canadian Football League, and if he's not in a system that's a perfect fit, well, suddenly the guy's a flop. By the same token, you have a kid who you pick in the 6th round who in college maybe wasn't that productive because it wasn't a fit. But everything clicks with where he is in the CFL.
What I think is an important thing is, like Chapman, okay? He chose not to come up here because they wouldn't pay him enough money. And, that was in the days you could barter and that kind of thing. And now it's pretty set in terms of what you get. But the money, a lot of times a player might come up from now an NIL where he's making maybe even $50,000 or $60,000, and he's going to make barely more than that as a rookie up here. So I think one of the keys up here in Canada, you have to love playing. And I think too often, you can look at a guy and he's made it up to a certain level because he's got great athletic ability. But if you don't love playing, it's going to catch up to you at this level. It just is. And I think when you get guys in the 6th and 7th round, a lot of times you're getting guys who love it and who will do anything they can to stay on that football team. And I mean, I had Brett Ralph, who was taken late and turned into a great player. There's been a few of them that they can just, if you get the right guy and the right fit and they love the game, that to me is a big part of it. One of the big problems with the early guys.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Brett Ralph example because that's that 2005 draft. Calgary picks Medel Robitaille, first overall, and he doesn't pan out.
Come on, he panned out.
Almost as well as Drew Willie. But Brett Ralph got picked in the last round of the same draft. Brett Ralph led all rookies in the Canadian Football League in receiving that year. Right?
I would say this, I think the point is very good about they have to have a passion for football, and the later round guys where they have to have an understanding. I think those guys really will stay on the PR for a couple of years, and then finally they get their opportunity. They're ready. They make plays when they get in the game, and then all of a sudden, wow, where has this guy been? Well, he's just been waiting his turn, where some guys don't wait 2 to 3 years. Some guys, it takes a couple of years. Chad Owens, how many, I know we're talking American now, but how long did Chad Owens before he became the great player he is?
But isn't that just a factor of transfer portal? You don't like where you are, you leave.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, right now in college, people
it gets ingrained in everybody. I don't like there's high school kids that are thinking about transferring because they don't like their situation.
Oh, don't start that conversation with me. It's going to take too long.
Wait. Before Farhan takes it, how many shots has Dwayne made about us making picks? I don't know if I've ever seen Dwayne Ford making a pick.
Give me a chance. Give me a chance.
Ethan Jordan has finally been picked by Ottawa. He got taken 51st in the 6th round. We think this guy's a very, very talented player. We'll get back and analyze some of these guys in a minute. But first,
Ethan Ball.
Ethan Ball, a physical player who got meaningful playing time at the Division I level at North Dakota and before transferring to Calgary. But we'll get into the final 2 rounds of the draft and maybe talk about some of these players a little bit more. But first, Dave Naylor and I had a chance to talk about the value of late round picks. Back again with Dave Naylor. And Dave, as we get into the later stages of this draft, we'll hear some names that maybe aren't necessarily as recognizable, but still guys that have a chance to make an impact.
Yeah, when you look at the pickings of the draft over the last few years in the 7th and 8th rounds, it is pretty slim in terms of guys that make a roster and contribute for a number of years. Of course, the CFL draft used to be only 6 rounds. They added 2 extras, but some stand out. Even a year ago, Joe, the receiver that Saskatchewan took in the 7th round. He made a bit of a splash as a rookie, earned himself an opportunity in the National Football League with the Indianapolis Colts. You go back to 2019, Colton Hunchak, the receiver with Calgary, recently retired. He was an 8th round pick out of York. But there's one year that stands out above all others when it comes to picks in the 7th and 8th round, and that is 2017, where there are 5 players that were taken that have all become significant CFL players. They are Richie Sindani, was a 8th round pick out of the University of Regina. Sean Thomas Erlington out of the University of Montreal, 8th round pick. Justin Herdman out of SFU, your school, Farhan, 7th round. Jordan Herdman out of SFU, also 7th round. And Ty Cranston, the defensive back out of Ottawa, recently retired, spent time with the Red Blacks, also in that late round of the 2017 draft. So we don't know if this is going to be like 2017 or like most of the other years where it's rare to find players in the 7th and 8th round, but certainly there are some opportunities for teams and players to get together at that stage of the process and maybe make a splash.
Every year.
So let's take a look at Ethan Jordan. Again, was on the receiving end of a number of passes from Taylor Elgersma, became the 18th receiver in U Sports history to register over 1,000 yards. He did that this past season, but not necessarily the bigger guy. You talked about maybe teams having some concern about special teams value, but the guy can run, the guy's productive. There's got to be a place for him, isn't there?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think Ethan Jordan he's a guy who's fast enough to get over the top on defenses, right? He's not the biggest guy, but ran the speed he had to run, came in bigger at the combine than what he had been listed at in college, what he had been measured at previously. So understanding the things that he has to do. Yeah, I think he's a guy who has absolutely earned the opportunity at the very least and probably deserved the opportunity earlier in the draft than this.
I think he probably tanked his own stock because he said, yeah, I'm probably a 4th or 5th rounder because I'm small. And then it was like everybody kind of went, okay, well, if you say it, then we'll just wait until the 6th and then we'll take you there. So I like Ethan, and the thing I've loved about him is, you can say, oh, it's the real technical route running, all the rest. He just floats. Like it's when he ran his 40 even at the combine, it wasn't really a big deal because it's like, oh yeah, there goes super fast guy, just kind of smooth, right, in and out of everything. So the thing that I actually like about this is the team fit again, and I really like the draft that Ottawa's putting together right now because the last couple of years you've been going like Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison, and then now you bring in Geno Lewis and you've got Khalil Pimpleton. You got this great mix and match of like, we got these really small slot guys and all. Well, Keelin White goes at the start of the draft tonight. He's not that much bigger than Ethan Jordan. Like realistically, it's like maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It's like 15 pounds
6'2"
maximum.
and 5'10".
No, yeah, but it's the way that I see their game actually looking for the most part. It's not going to feel that different when you're in a training camp. But they've got a nice mix and match, I think, in Ottawa.
I think when you're drafting receivers, they fall in 2 categories for me. Is this guy going to have the ability to be a good receiver, but also do a little bit blocking inside? Because teams don't want to play with a fullback on the field all the time. I'm sorry, Dwayne, sometimes they want 5R, and they want to be able to run the ball with a big slot. Or you have a smaller guy who can be a returner, diminutive, can run. Ethan Jordan fits that role. You can put him out at Z and then move him in other positions. And, he was productive on tape. He was great with the ball in his hands. I think at times he can be a little bit better in and out of his breakpoint mechanics. I think he slips and falls a little bit, but this is a good kid. You put him on the practice squad. And again, these later round picks, if they're intelligent, when there's injuries, if they can live within the system, play 4 or 5 different spots, then you're like, wow, this kid's smart. I can put him in any spot and he can figure it out. That's what Ethan will have to do when he gets to Ottawa. Just be a smart guy who can play a number of different
You know
spots.
what he is a big play guy. The guy, I mean, you can't watch film of him and not see big play after big play, whether it's a long pass, whether it's a speed sweep. And Ottawa does a lot of that with Khalil Pimpleton, and this guy's going to be able to step in and make plays because he's fast. Now, again, he's undersized. Why does that hurt a guy? Because it's hard to have a lot of backups that can't play special teams, and at 5'10", it's difficult. But if he could return, that would help him. Again, that's the biggest problem that happens to smaller receivers is how you can't. It's hard to have a guy who's not playing. He's not playing if he's a backup on offense. And he's not playing special teams because the special teams coach says, no, my guy's got to be at least 6'1". You know, I mean, and that's just the way they are. I mean, I've been a GM. They come in, I can't have this guy. And so that's kind of how it works. But Ethan Jordan is a playmaker, and he's proven that he can do that. He can make big plays, whether it's speed sweeps. He's not a chicken. He's going to go and he'll block. Again, 5'10", 175 pounds. But he still is going to go after it and do the best he can. But he's a big play guy. Not a bad thing to pick late when you can have a guy who can make big plays and has proven he's a big player.
How about Colby Herford from the University of Alberta? Just got taken with the 3rd pick in round 7, 5'11", 195, so a little bit bigger than Jordan. Has run a 4.51, has some speed, but didn't necessarily have the same level of production throughout his career at Alberta.
Yeah, but that's injury related too, right? As to him having a dip. But yeah, Herford's a similar kind of guy. I know they moved him around a little bit at Alberta, playing different positions and so on. But he's another one of those receivers, not necessarily the biggest guy, but I think a guy who has been productive when given the opportunity. And if he's a fit, learns the system and so on, a guy who can fit as certainly a backup receiver to start off in the Canadian Football League.
He's a bit of a body catcher, and instead of catching a ball with his hands naturally, he's a body catcher. That's one of the big drawbacks on him. And then again, he's not going to be the most physical guy. So is he going to be able to play special teams? And again, that's for backup receivers. That's their crawl.
Yeah.
Here's a look at Herford right here. You can see the fact that he was a Canada West All-Star back in 2022, had some injuries since then, has been productive, 74 catches, over 1,200 yards, and 12 touchdowns in 29 games. As we look to the back end of the draft, round 7 and 8, the one guy that really stood out last year is, what do we got here?
Just getting ready.
What is this?
Is there a story here?
There it is.
Well, pick 61. Fantastic pick.
There we go. The mule.
Strong. My guy, Max von Muhldorfer, to his hometown Calgary Stampeders. Awesome pick for the Stamps. This is a kid who grew up in a family of Stampeder season ticket holders. Just an outstanding kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And
He was
you
impressive.
guys saw him at the Combine.
He was impressive there.
The mule strong, custom-made hat. This comes from, Max is a power lifter.
Yeah.
Like Canadian age group champion, national power lifter, a guy who would love to compete in the Olympics, quite frankly, and may have an opportunity to do that. Happens to be my son's roommate.
Wow.
So there is no kid I know better in this draft. Love him to death. Very proud.
And the guy loves to play.
Oh, absolutely.
He absolutely loves to play. And like I say, an interior defensive lineman who can play special teams because he runs 4.9. I think it's a fabulous pick.
You will not get a kid who wants to play more in the Canadian Football League and wants to play more for the team that just drafted him than Max von Muhldorfer.
That's awesome.
That makes my heart skip a beat.
430-pound clean and jerk, like the most ever in Canada, I read somewhere. So I'm not sure which of you is clean and which of you is a jerk. like that's a significant number.
The thing that jumped out to me too at the Combine is like Dwayne tells me about how amazing Max is, and it's I started talking to Max's family, whether they're incredible people as well, and they could not have been more excited to just have him involved in the process because I can't believe we're here. Max is a part of this, and then. As the Combine is going on, we're there Thursday and there's interviews, and Friday they're on field, and then the testing happens, and then Saturday, and by the time that we got to Sunday morning, Max was taking reps, O-line, D-line, fullback, didn't care. He was running around, he was doing all this.
And they were short at deep tackle because Darien Newell had to leave.
And so he was taking all of these reps at different places, but beyond just that, I've never been at a CFL combine. You guys have been around it longer than I have. I've never seen not just his positional group, but all of the positional groups that he was kind of tinkering into, cheering for him after reps. I was like, how likable do you have to be when you're at a job interview competing with people in the same draft? And every rep they're taking, they're like, hell yeah, Max. And I was like, man, this is like O-line deal. There were receivers that were running over and congratulating him. I'm like, that is the telltale sign.
Here was an interesting thing. When he did his first, I watched all the 3 cones. He did his first 3 cone. It was ridiculous. Everyone's like, oh my God. A lot of these guys are waiting for their next rep and everything. It was funny. His second rep, every D lineman's like, what is he going to do this time? They were just amazed how big a guy like that could move. Yeah, give this guy an opportunity, keep him in your building, and then when he gets an opportunity, there you go. Big body, can throw people out of the way and can run.
He's a fun one.
Let's take a look at the 7th round, where we have another quarterback that's just been taken. The Montreal Alouettes have taken Jonathan Senecal, Heck Crichton Trophy winner, Vanier Cup Championship game MVP.
Over Arnaud Desjardins, though. That's my first thought on that immediately, is the Montreal Alouettes did the internal and decided that was the pick.
But when you look at his athleticism,
exactly.
He's a pretty dynamic mover.
Yeah, of course, It's the movement skills I get and all the rest, but it's like, man, Arnaud is, obviously they have their differences, but both working with Miles Gibbon, who does a tremendous job coaching the quarterbacks up and getting them up to speed, and both these guys can absolutely rip it.
I can tell you, here's what I love about Senecal. We go to the combine, they do 225 on the bench, he goes there, bam, bam, done.
Yeah.
Didn't need to do more. He's a quarterback. He knows he just wanted to prove, I've done the preparation, I can lift this amount of weight, I'm going to lift it in such a way that I can do a lot more, but I'm not going to do more because I got to throw later today.
Well, Senecal is University of Montreal. Desjardins is Laval. And Danny Machocha is making the pick. Now, who recruited Senecal there? I'm not going to call nepotism. I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. I love the way Senecal plays. I think that's a great pick that Danny took him. Fantastic. Jesse Palmer.
The 3rd time in the history of the CFL draft that 3 quarterbacks have been taken in the draft.
Wow.
That's awesome.
We've had 5 taken in the last decade.
So
we've had 3 tonight.
So we know he can move.
Right.
Can he throw the ball well enough to make a dent in the roster?
I watched the Laval game, and I hear my notes. He operates the offense very well. He gets through his progressions. His primary is covered. He flips his hips, finds his secondary throws. He definitely can create with his legs. And there's something to be said with getting 1 first down with your legs. A lot of guys can do that. This guy gets a 30-yard play with his legs when he has to create. So we all know that. And he had a drive to win at the end of that Laval game. He took him right down the field, threw a touchdown. He was impressive to watch on tape as a thrower as well as a runner.
30 touchdown passes in the last 2 years of his collegiate career. And we talk about the quickness, that short shuttle, 4.08, which I think was the 2nd best time at the combine. So pretty impressive measurables, right? If the arm can keep up and he's got time to make that happen, this is a long game for a player like that. But to go into a room with Jason Moss and learn from him and learn from Anthony Calvillo, that's a pretty good situation for this young man.
Yeah, I think so often people want to look at the background. Oh, he's a U Sports quarterback. I just want to note, Jonathan Senecal is a guy who turned down Division I football to stay and play at University of Montreal.
Great point.
Well, we've still got about 10 more picks to go. We'll get into the back end of the 7th round as we go here. Trey Lang, another player that we thought might go earlier in the draft in a very deep defensive line group. Jim?
Another Western player, Alex Berwick. Very good center, I think. I think maybe the best natural center. Well, I like Ethan Pyle. He's smaller. Alex Berwick a little bit bigger. But it's getting tiresome for you here, as spewing all these Western guys.
Yeah, I mean, Berwick's a neat story as well because he's a guy who basically made the decision. He was at Western. He was probably up around 350 pounds, and people told him, you're not going to be able to play in the CFL at that weight. And this is a young man who has taken his nutrition, his training very seriously to get his weight down in order to put himself in a position to compete for this opportunity.
As for Lang, his father played for the Argos back in '94, raised in Canada, so that gave him the opportunity to qualify as a Canadian, but he's been to 5 different schools, and all for reasonable reasons. There was nothing in the background that was untoward, but how much in the current era, like that would be huge red flags 5 years ago. But is it a thing anymore, guys? Lapo, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna evaluate and go, hey, he's athletic here, but there's reasons why we're taking him this low. I'm not going to waste a pick when I can get somebody that I can trust that can make a roster, do these things. There's just too many unknowns, and that's always going to put you down, whether it be you're going to have all these other categories like, hey, we're unsure of injury status, we're unsure of character, we're unsure he hasn't played or he's been kept transferring. So they're going to try to research it as much, but sooner or later you're going to fall if you're not in a consistent place.
He's difficult to evaluate because he had the ACL in 23 at Indiana, transfers to Eastern Michigan. Again, coming off of an ACL is difficult, and a lot of times the second year, which would be this year, he'll be better. He'll be able to move better. He'll be able to get off blocks. I thought he struggled getting off blocks and was a little bit stiff, so he hasn't shown that he can play, but the fact he was at Indiana when he got hurt and had a chance to play there means that if he can get himself rehabbed and get healthy, he could be. That's a great late pick.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out. His dad, Trace Lang, I have known since high school, actually, and was a teammate of mine with the Argos. Trey getting on the draft list actually kind of came about as I stumbled across his name on a roster, saw that Trace was his dad, tracked down his father and said, family's been living in the States. Told him, your sons, he has another brother as well, Kyler, who's playing D2 football, but these guys qualify for Canadian citizenships because dad is a Canadian citizen.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to see that it has worked out for them.
Yes.
And no relation to Cleon.
I think they're actually,
no.
I was actually told that they are cousins. I don't know of what separation. I don't think first cousins, but they are connected, and I think have had some contact with Cleon as Trey was going through this process.
8th round coming up. Just a couple minutes left. These final few picks will come fast and furious. So this is our last chance to talk before the season starts, or before the preview show. So as we look at what teams have done here, and I know we got to go through the list before we can kind of get into winners and losers, but just based on offseason, which teams are you most excited to see and how they've evolved? Jim, let's start with you.
Well, obviously, I'm excited to watch and see what Edmonton does. They've completely revamped everything. They went out and paid a lot of money for different players, and Trey Ford is going to get his opportunity to see if he can be a starting quarterback. I mean, there's so many great questions there that it's exciting. So that team, I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to watch the way they put it together. Mark Killam in his first effort as a head coach. There's just a lot of exciting things going on in Edmonton.
I like what the Montreal Alouettes did. They re-signed their players, and they said, hey, we're going to make a change. Davis Alexander's going to come in and be the starting quarterback. They go young there. I love that they brought in a veteran quarterback and Mac to be a backup for him. And this just gives them an already good defense. Let this young kid, manage the games. Like, he's a playmaker. He can make plays all over the place.
Yeah, he'll do a lot more than manage the games.
But he's got a defense, so they can kind of tell him, hey, listen, we'll take care of some things. We'll be able to score on defense. We're going to keep you in games, so you don't have to do it all. But I think Montreal, they just keep rebuilding and continuing to build their Canadian depth. I love their guys on defense. They got a number of guys. Demi Berglund had such a great year last year. I think Montreal had a good offseason.
I'm interested, I think, to see, there's a lot of storylines, but the receivers that went from west to east, Kenny Lawler going to Hamilton in free agency, Gino Lewis making his way to Ottawa from Edmonton. I can't wait to see how that kind of plays out. But the one I'm most interested in, above all else, above even Edmonton in my mind, is how do you get Nathan Rourke back up to what he was previously? Like, I think that defines this entire 2025 CFL season, because Nathan is such a cheat code when he is at his very best, because the ball just comes out so quick and so accurate and everybody around him looks great. It's like they are building a roster around him, not just for 2025, but for 26, 27, 20. You're our guy.
That's going to take some time,
right?
Though, in terms of getting receiver depth and
but not
some
even
of the things
receivers.
that they lost.
I'm just saying the whole thing now is, hey, Nathan, you're on every billboard and poster, and we're going to build this thing, and you're going to be our superstar in this league. how do we get you back up to speed? Because you just didn't really look like yourself because of how much tumultuous situations he went through, NFL, CFL, coming back.
But think about 2022 and how good that receiving core is and how many of those guys were in peak portions of their careers. Now they're going to have to rely on some young guys to really step up.
Yeah.
You know, Keon Hatcher's kind of the one veteran player, but after that, you know, there's still some questions there to give Nathan the number of weapons we'd like him to see to get to that level. Dwayne?
Yeah, and you could come up with an intriguing storyline, I think, in every single CFL city without a problem. And I mean, for me, in the name of being different than anything's been said, I'm going to say Winnipeg. This is a team that has been to 5 straight Grey Cups and have achieved that with a certain level of continuity from year to year. Obviously, there's been some change, but this is the most change that they have ever had over the course of that 5 years from one season to the next. And I'm curious to see how that transition goes. They got off to a slow start in 2024 as they made some adjustments, but as the season went on, they started to look like the same Winnipeg Blue Bombers they had been for the previous few years. A little bit more change this year. I'm curious to see how the first part of the season goes and if they are able to, again, find their way as it unfolds again.
For me, it's Calgary. I want to see Vernon Adams working with Dave Dickinson. You know, seeing what they've done, I think it's going to bring out the best in a guy like Reggie Bagleton. I think getting Dom Rhymes, he's not that old. He's still got some miles left. You pick up a guy like Damian Alford here. I'm excited to see what Vernon Adams can do with the keys to his car and another chip on his shoulder. Because
and Max Van Mueldorfer is his fullback. I mean,
there you go.
Amen.
He's like Travis Hunter. He's going to play every way.
Another interesting thing is to the Toronto Argonauts. You know, last year at the beginning of the season, we're like, oh my God, they have so many changes on defense. How are they ever going to recover? Well, they recovered very well. Yeah. So, but it's another year with another changeover of players. So can they continue to perform at a high level with so much change in players, coaches, all those things? So that's an interesting thing to watch with the Toronto Argonauts.
David Mackey out in BC.
Yeah, Lucas
In
Stoikos.
comes Lucas Stoikos.
From the University of Toronto. Yeah, one of the most athletic players in the draft. Certainly. Great tester out of U of T.
King Embers gets taken too there.
Another one of those long DBs.
Long corners, played corner in the combine, did some nice things at the combine, tested well.
Yeah.
Good athlete late in the draft.
Yeah, and certainly to have a Canadian who can step in at the corner spot, right? If you have injuries, bigger body that can play some special teams.
Well, and he's a guy that has been really a press man type of player. You know, can he play? He doesn't look like a guy that's going to go to safety. If he plays corner, can he play off coverage?
He was another one who was impressed way too much early in the combine, and you saw him when he was playing off. He had opportunities to make plays on the ball using his speed.
Ultimately, a starter at the Division I level, 4'5" in the 40, and 34-inch arms. So that length you got to like if you got a guy out there in the corner.
This is usually the part of the draft where I start to highlight which U Sports schools have draft streaks going. And I hate to tell you guys this, but the one that's at risk right now is a certain Maroon school that features a Marauder as the logo. 12 years strong going right now. Last year, Guelph had 11 in a row. That got broken. This year, it looks like, unless Nicholas Adair, the receiver, goes. Usually, this is the point where I would text Vince Magri when he was still with the Toronto Argonauts because he's a Mac guy. I'd be like, hey, Vinny, I need a favor. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that happened with Western when Craig Butler was working there with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Who was it, the linebacker that went? Miles Manalo. That was the last. That saved Western's draft streak, and they continue to roll along. But I'm not going to hear the end of it if I wore the maroon blazer.
Nick Adair had a pretty good
athletic all-around
invitational combine. Yeah, he was one of only 2 guys. He and Malik Cote from Laurier were the only 2 guys to finish in the top 8 in all of the the movement and jump tests. That I thought he might get a look in an uncertain receiver class, right?
I want to praise the league on one thing, and you hear the coaches talk about it. The combine, going from a one-day combine to a couple of days with meetings, having an opportunity to spend more time with these players. I can't tell you how many coaches told me they love that format. Noel Thorpe's worked it every year. He's coached defensive backs all 3 seasons of it. Now, here's a couple interesting things. I'm listening to an offensive line coach the morning of the first testing. He says, I don't know if this kid's any good, as an offensive lineman walks by. He goes, but that kid at 6 a.m. was in the weight room when I was in the weight room. So their guys can make impressions. And that's I hope all these young players have an understanding of. I guarantee you the Saskatchewan Roughriders, brought Gordon Gilroy, their equipment guy, in and said, hey, was there anybody who treated you poorly? Was there anybody, what happened? Were these guys good? Or, hey, this kid was late to meetings 3 different times. And I do know coaches in meetings were basically saying, hey, you learned an offense and a defense today. Draw it up on the board, Jim. So you gave you more opportunities to just, instead of seeing them for half an hour.
Well, there was always a big advantage when you were the coaching staff. In the old days, it used to be if it was in Toronto, the Toronto staff did it, and you could set people up. I mean, you really could. I mean, we wanted Anthony Coombs in the worst way. So in one-on-ones, we just made sure he went against the toughest guy and tried to get cleat marks up his chest.
Excellent.
Sorry, Anthony, it's
plan.
just a good story. And
just because you wanted him.
That's right, because we wanted him. Yeah. I mean, so the worse he looked, the better chance he falls. Anyway, those kind of things happen. And like having the same coaching staff every year, those kind of things can happen. Yeah. So Noel Thorpe, maybe he won't be there next year.
Well, I thought about it when Noel Thorpe took Nate Boschman earlier, right? Yep. Like that, those are 2 guys that spent a lot of time together at the Combine.
And he had him and Finley together doing different things. And in our league, Noel Thorpe is as good on defense as anybody. And he chose Boschman over Finley.
Yeah. Daniel Wiebe just went to his hometown Riders, U of S player. Going to the Riders in the 8th round, 69th overall.
Best short shuttle?
3.95 on a short shuttle, which is ridiculous. But he's under 5'9". He's got thick legs. He's not necessarily the easiest guy to bring down at that size. And we've seen players at that size, Weston Dressler and others, that have managed to have some success. Can Daniel Wiebe have success as a receiver in this league?
He just has to, as I said before, he's got to be a plug-and-play guy. He's got to go. If there's the starter is out all of a sudden in practice, training camp, if the starter gets out, he jumps in and he knows everybody's spot on the field. So if he can use his football instincts and football IQ to play at different spots, yeah, that's okay, because then there'll be times they get him the ball in space where he can run and make people miss. There's a role for a guy in that. But he also has to be the guy who motions out of the way when they want to throw to this guy and all that stuff. So if he's intelligent enough, he's got some of the skills with a ball in his hand in a big field. He's just got to make sure he can handle the volume of football that comes in pro football.
And obviously has those natural limitations when it comes to size, but one of my favorite kind of mini moments from the Combine in Regina this year was watching Daniel Wiebe trying to, bomber, dig out the backside defensive end as he was going through an inside run period. And they made him do it 4 or 5 times in a row against Jeremiah Ojo. And it was...
Were you calling plays to him?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, like I said,
it was so...
Maybe Saskatchewan wanted him and they set that up.
I want to say that it was painful because it was obviously unfair, because it's just a terrible mismatch that in no way, shape, or form during an actual CFL game would you ever go, I think Daniel Wiebe can dig that guy out. It's going to be fine. But they did it, and Wiebe never quit. Never quit. And that might have just earned him an 8th round draft selection because he just never gave up. And every time he was like, I failed 4 times in a row. Hey, let's do it again. Get back on the ball. And he was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to get thrown off the ball again.
Well, it's like running back linebacker one-on-one. It's the worst thing ever. Those guys come full speed and hit the running backs. Running backs can't do anything.
Oh, Marsh, look at that. The last guy picked.
Yep.
Is that
well, a couple fantastic picks at the end of this. Very interesting to me. I had a list of about 7 or 8 names of players who were injured this season, basically, but who were very draftable. And this is the last 2 guys. Iwanosa U, we're just going to call him Iwanosa U because I'm not going to attempt that. And Demetrius Masuka at McMaster, defensive back. Iwanosa, offensive lineman.
McMaster, the streak
Magri lives on.
Yes.
Holy
last pick of the draft.
cow.
But this is a guy that you talk to anybody at McMaster, speak incredibly highly of Masuka, not just as a football player, but as a person. Very high character kid.
Nice.
And a very good defensive back, but was out. I think it was an ACL that kept him out this season. But this is a guy that, the people that did their homework, honestly, this is a guy that was on their radar before this season. And as for the offensive lineman out of University of Alberta, Iwanosa, he's a big-bodied guy. Again, a guy who missed this season, but the people that did their homework and aware of him recognize, this is a prospect worth drafting.
Well, that's it, boys. 8 rounds, 72 picks in the books, and we got a McMaster guy in.
Wow.
Thank you, Argos. We all appreciate it. Now I don't have to live down wearing this forever.
There you go. I'm sour. One of my SFU guys didn't get picked, but I can't even say that anymore because they don't have a program. So, yeah. But I'm hoping that Sam Davenport finds a place. He actually finished his career at UBC, but I'm hoping that he wasn't one of the 8 rounds, but maybe he'll still get a signing.
Yeah, Sam Davenport, Jahari Hastings, another.
The one to put Laurier
Simon
played in
Fraser
that team. Yeah.
Yep.
Davenport actually, like when they had the Shrum Bowl 2 years or 3 years ago, had an incredible game against UBC, and then the next year he's playing for UBC, and had 2 great seasons for them. But look, it was fun as always. Looking forward to seeing how these guys progress, and when we come back here next year, we can talk about who did what. For Jim Barker, Paul Lapalisse, Marshall Ferguson, Dwayne Ford, it is the 2025 CFL Draft. Training camps begin in just over a week. These guys have very little time to get their contracts signed, their bags packed and moved into their new locations. It'll be like nothing you ever expected. Good luck, gentlemen, and we'll see you on opening night.